This is
the
Bhangra Podcast.
Sup, y'all? So we got something super different for y'all today. Yesterday, on July 2nd, we had a live roundtable of some Bhangra mixers answering questions from y'all. We asked y'all to submit questions on Instagram and Twitter, but we also had a live stream chat in our Discord server while this was going on. We had an awesome conversation on the roundtable, but also in the stream chat that Nana will be referring to throughout the conversation. If you check the video description, there are a ton of links, all of which are referred to by the panel members. If you liked what you heard or have some feedback, please let us know in the comments. As always, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Podchaser. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Discord at the Bhangra Pod. And most importantly, subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Let's start, and if Mo doesn't join, that's okay. I'll just also be our third panelist. All right, guys, you there? We good to go?
Yep, still here.
Cool. All right, so everyone listening in, welcome. Like I said earlier, you can use the stream chat to type and talk to each other and to us as this is going. I'm be modding in here, and Umar is going to be modding the chat text channel. So if you guys want to let us know anything or asking more questions, we solicited a bunch of questions from you guys ahead of time. So I have all of those if anyone sent any in, but if as we're talking you guys have other things that you want to know, feel free to drop them in there, and we'll take a look. So by way of introduction, I'm Nana. I currently dance for DDR. I am also one of their mixers. The other one is here with us. I'm their in-house mixer. I've been mixing since 2014, and I am an admin on the Bhangra Pod. So, Thig, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Thig. I dance with VSB, dance with NorCal Naujawan, and I've been mixing for about like 4 or 5 years now, competitively. So happy to answer everyone's questions and hopefully share some knowledge.
Hey, I'm KRRN. I was a dolly for Spartan Bhangra, and I was their in-house mixer. And yeah, I've been mixing for about 3 years now, and I'm excited for this roundtable.
Cool. So, like I said, we have some questions which I'm gonna drop in as we go, and if you guys want to just like as a starting point and just talk about some other stuff, like that's also cool. I think hopefully we have enough knowledge between you guys for everyone to pick up on something. So I guess first question would just be you can talk a little bit about like the software you guys use and what goes into what's the process between when you first have to like decide that you have to make a segment or a mix, then the order in which things happen, or you to get something up on your screen that you start to actually play around with some sounds. So where do you guys pull music from? What order do you guys work in? What's your process when it comes to pulling something out?
I can start this one. So I'm kind of a dinosaur when it comes to the mixing game. I'm still on Acid Pro 7, which came out in like 2000. Like I don't even know when. Like I was probably still in elementary school at the time. But something I've realized is that software, as far as mixing goes, like of what you make of it, you can install a bunch of plugins, get it up to speed with some of the more modern softwares like Ableton and stuff, in terms of the technology that has built into it. When it comes to building a segment, I personally just love finding a song that I'm kind of vibing with at the time, something that is like on my playlist, something at the top of my charts. And I'll throw that into Acid and just see what happens. Throw it in and then just start playing random stuff on Spotify, on YouTube, whatever comes up, whatever comes to my mind. And as far as leisurely mixing goes, that's typically my process with getting started. Typically, just extract an instrumental or a vocal piece or a Punjabi song as a whole. Just just throw things at it, see what sticks. As far as team mixing goes, I think it's typically teams will give me a segment ahead of time. A lot of teams nowadays are mixing on old mixes, previously used mixes. They like the complexity that exists nowadays in a lot of these team mixes, like RVD's mix, for example. And I think a lot of the time, like I just kind of throw that in acid, beat map it, figure out exactly how many counts they need, match it with their choreo, and then pick songs according to what I like in my library. And hopefully the teams like it
Do
as
you
well.
find that for when you're doing when you're doing team mixes nowadays, then it sounds like you're mostly actually reverse engineering your segments as opposed to making something from scratch like you.
Yeah, you'd be very surprised actually. Like nowadays, a lot of teams are. It's funny because it's like a never-ending cycle. You know, I think it started with the Fortile Circle City mix, that G Sing segment, legendary intro, which
Yo,
it was really
100%.
it was, you know, you remember that one, right? It's super like complicated and
Hell
stuff,
yeah.
a lot of different elements, and there was just a lot that you could kind of do on it. So one team took that, ran with it, and next thing you know, you have a bunch of other teams just like hopping on that mix, another team hopping on their mix. Remember when I made a couple segments for RVD this past Berg, but they were choreoing on a different mix, and now other teams that I'm mixing for are choreoing on that RVD mix. So it's like a kind of it's an interesting way to go about it. It's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, you know, you have all this complicated musical elements and stuff. It pushes the mixer, you know, it pushes me to try to outdo the segment that is on my plate that I have to deal with. On the other hand, I feel like sometimes the creativity can go out the door because it's the same thing over and over again. So yeah, I think that's typically what constitutes my process in terms of team mixing.
What about you?
Yeah, for the most part, very similar. So as far as team mixes go, um, I think I completely agree with Teg. You know how he says everyone's trying to just like sort of refine a previously used like sequence, and like his RVD segment. Or I didn't know that you just listened to something else and then pretty much tried to um, or like the choreo was done to something else and you pretty much just tried to mix to that. But that was pretty impressive. Um, my team mixing is, yeah, I just throw it up there. Beat map it, which is just like making sure that whatever tempo that the dancers want to dance at, that's the speed of the song you're going to be mixing in. And then I just try to figure out what key it's in, and then try to see what instrumentals I may have in like my music library, and see what fits, and then see if I vibe with that like pairing. Like this is usually if I'm mixing for a team where like I have like this particular rush to get a segment out. But if I'm mixing for like just if I feel like making something, then it's usually a product of like I'll be listening to some song on a drive, and then randomly an idea pops in my head to like make a mashup of that song with something else. I don't really try to force any mashups out. So yeah, that's generally just my approach to things, like as far as mixing just for fun goes. Just don't try to force anything out.
I definitely found that, like, because what you're talking about, like, just like going for a drive and like having an idea. I think that anyone who starts mixing, it's like a certain point after which
Oh
you
yeah,
cannot listen to music without thinking, what song would this go with? Like, you just kind of.
exactly. Yeah, and that it's not just that. Like especially after mixing, so the thing is, you're not just like a producer. You're also like you're becoming an audio engineer, and you start dissecting like how an original song has been mixed while you're listening to the song. Like sometimes I think I've lost the ability to just like listen to music and just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah, no, agreed. I feel like I'm exploiting every song that I listen to in my head. 100%.
You mentioned this about like other teams giving you segments that they've like already danced to and then asking you to recreate one. And
Mhm.
someone actually asked us about that, so I wanted to know what both of you guys thought about that process. I also have to say, I think this is like a relatively new thing.
100%, yeah.
When I like started mixing, first team that I was mixing for, which was my own team, um, just like there was not that was not a thing. Like the first time that I did that, where I was mixing to another team's map thing, was probably like 2018 or so, and that was just because I purely like the timeline that I had and that the team had like didn't match up, and so I basically asked the captain of that team that I was mixing for, like, choreo to something else. I'll make the mix work afterwards, and I honestly fucking hated it But, like, how do you guys feel about it? Because I feel like it's becoming more commonplace now. Also, why is it more commonplace now?
I think it's just easier to get started with, you know? You don't have to hit up a DJ first and have them just create something out of thin air. There's already,
Yeah, I think it's just like an
stuff out there.
efficiency sort of like,
Do you guys prefer that though, or do you guys prefer to like not have like a template?
I wouldn't say it's a preference. I would say it's like I don't mind it, you know, like if it gets the job done and if it leads to something like, to be honest, like at the end of the day, what are we really like taking away? It's just like the counts, right? If you think about it, and if you're gonna like create a whole mix surrounding the whole counts, then I still think it's like for the most part original work, and it's um I don't know, it leads to some interesting outputs. And so far, like I didn't know that Teghead you know, was like sort of mixing to a previously mixed segment, right? So, and like that was a pretty creative set to me, that mix. So I personally don't mind it. I would say I know that some DJs do this thing where they let teams mix to choreo to previous mixes of theirs, and then you know basically just like sort of revamp it later with like updated songs and such. So some people find that more efficient. I think at some point I think it also becomes like what helps you you know make what helps you be more efficient during this creative process.
Yeah, it's also just like it establishes a level of comfort for the team because now can do whatever they want on it inspires more choreo to dance on a mix that's already, you know, like quote unquote hype compared to a normal song, like songs put together or something like that, a practice mix that a DJ might put together in an evening or something like that. And I think as far as the choreo that it inspires, I think that is also a double-edged sword because on the one hand you are basically just taking counts from another team and like doing the exact same segment just with different choreo. So and eventually different songs. So it looks unique, but you know it's coming from somewhere. So it's not completely just like haven't completely just come up with it like that. They didn't start on the blank template. So
So Thig, you and I actually ran into this issue when Thig and I worked together on DDR's mix this past season. Thig, I don't know if you remember, but the ending we ran into this issue because it was originally done to remember what mix it was? It was an SDS mix, right?
I remember now, yeah. It was
It was
something, yeah.
there was some other mix basically that we got the first draft of, and it had been choreographed to another team's mix. Then when we were trying to Thig and I were trying to pick songs, and it was tough because we were getting like the number of counts to like almost match, but one of the songs in the original mix was like in most songs are in counts of 8. So we all danced like 5, 6, 7, 8, right? But it was like there was a count of 6 in there, and like that's not very common. We had
Yeah,
an
that's
issue
probably
finding
Punjabi
us.
songs.
Yeah, so Punjabi songs are like that, but the very specific ones. And then like hit in the choreo didn't line up with where the hit in like where our mix was. It just like took a couple of iterations, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think you just have to be open to that as a captain. Like I guess I definitely prefer that if someone gives me a template, they understand that like you have to work with each other. Like same way I need to work with now the choreo that you've given me to create a mix. Like you got to work with now the mix that I'm giving you to make sure that like it's also it's more unique then, right? It's a product of both like the choreo and the mix.
Exactly. Yeah, and I remember it's funny because before I think teams used to ask the DJ way ahead of time for the mix and they would just put something together and the team would make choreo to that, whatever their DJ would make, you know? It would be specific
Yeah,
to that
that's the
team.
process that like I'm used to.
Exactly, yeah. But now it's like it's completely different, you know? It's a whole different game. So,
Why is that?
I think you know sometimes like teams will hit you up like a week or two before the comp and be like, "Yo, we need a mix." And if anybody's listening from those teams, you know who you are. But and that puts a lot
Guys,
of stress.
don't do that. That's really
Sorry,
rude
I'm
and
sorry.
hard.
Sorry, I love working with those teams because again, it pushes me as a creative, and it's a really good thing to sometimes mix on those existing mixes because like all right, I have this whole thing, and I really have to impress this team because they've already been so impressed with this mix. The entire team has been dancing to this mix the entire like season, and they've kind of drawn a connection to it. Now I have to pull them away from this mix and make them like my mix. You know, like that's the kind of thing that's going on in my head. I want to impress based on something that's already so impressive. So, and I think that's what's really pushing the mixing game forward nowadays. Like, you know, teams really push their DJs, especially like teams that are really trying to make a statement on stage. Like, they want those mixes to pop. And they will push their DJs until like the mix pops. And
Yeah,
I
I
remember,
definitely agree with that.
yeah, for like way back in senior year of high school, I made my first mix for this team called AMG Pangra from UC Santa Barbara. And I had started this high school team and made like a segment or two for them. I sent those segments over to AMG and I was like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Like, you guys want to like just use these? They're like, yo, just give us your whole mix, man. Like, we love this. Just we'll just like choreo to this mix. And like that was it. Like like modifications here and there, different sound effects, cut some counts, add some counts, and like that was their mix. You know, like they had a level of flexibility, and they had time. They had time to make their segments. Now it's like, okay, hiring the DJ comes a little bit later. Like, we're gonna think about that a little bit down the road, closer to the comp. So it's interesting, like the change in your perception of mixing nowadays.
Shrikaran, I wanted to ask you because you have you've mixed in house and then also I know you've actually mixed for a couple of other teams also besides your own. How do you feel like it's different? Obviously, it is different. I would assume it's like a different process, but because I think in one case being at practice stuff makes a difference when you see the process happening. Like how does your process change, and like do you have a preference?
I think the biggest thing is when you're mixing in-house, like it's just communication, right? Like, um, I don't. I've been trying to understand why like in-house mixes always turn out way better. Maybe there's like a certain element to it, like just closer to like to your heart because it's like your own team or something. Um, but the biggest difference I would say between like in-house the really
You dropped off. I
hello.
don't know. You're back.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just saying the difference between like in-house and not in-house, I would say, is just the communication between captains, choreographers, and the DJ. Um, and also, it's not just pure communicating like deadlines or anything. It's also like how they communicate their ideas. Like there's some I can't really name a specific example right now, but there's sometimes where you talk about like your vision, but you can't really express it, necessarily. You can't really articulate yourself well, and uh, you just like I've just sat in like many meetings where like three captains are all like trying to explain something to me, but I'm just
I think you dropped off again.
yeah, so I was just saying I don't know how to express what they want from a mix standpoint without them providing me with like certain examples and really going into detail of what they want, and that's like the biggest difference between in-house and let's say the relationship is more like an outside DJ. The big thing is communicating these small details like when passing by. These are like the big things that really adds up at the end.
Anything to add? You've
Definitely,
also you've mostly done actually for hire mixes, right?
what's that?
You've mostly been like a for hire mixer, right? I think you've done a
Yeah.
couple in house, but you're mostly for hire.
Yeah, only in-house ones that I've done like while I'm dancing would be W and VSB, and it is a different. Like, thing is, you hold those mixes a little bit closer to your heart. You spend a lot more time on them. So most likely the in-house mixes are gonna be a better product. Or if you have an in-house mixer that's like really breaking down everything they want to an out-of-town mixer, like that's something that is very beneficial. You know, you can bring your laptop to practice. If there are not enough counts or you need more counts, just add them in right there. and you don't have to worry
Man,
about
yeah,
like
that
doing a
happens.
week.
That's a common problem for in-house mixers, having to fly to the comp with like your hard drive in the back. I know Angela's on and can probably attest to this. I like go to Berg after being up till 2 o'clock in the morning making the mix, then got there and pulled out my hard drive ready to like make more changes if necessary. So it really cuts both ways.
Yeah, and yeah, no, it's. I mean, yeah, it's not bad. Like, I enjoy it because like sometimes I don't have to, hit a run through or something like that. I can just be on the side, just like grinding out the mix. Save some energy. And yeah, no, it's. I prefer the in-house route for sure.
um. So let's see what else from this list. If anyone has any other questions, I have, like I said, I have a list, but is there anything else that we're talking about you guys want us to expound on? Just drop a line in the chat. So I have this theory that everyone, I know some of the other pod guys have heard me say this, but that all mixers are somewhere on the spectrum between like being various audio engineers, and then like the other on the spectrum I would say is like people who just move the dials up and down until it sounds right. Like, where do you guys fall on that spectrum?
I would add another level to that spectrum. I would add like just a pure listener, because I feel like just listening to music, you get kind of inspired as a creative. You hear songs that you feel like should go well together, and you kind of just sit down one day and are like, I'm just going to try this out. And that's, it's like, all right, maybe I'll just adjust a few levels. Eventually, like you'll have an ear for it. You'll gain an ear for it, and that's what brings you up to like closer to the production level. Because then you're like, all right, now that I know two songs, I can make two songs work together. Now we have to make it sound good. Now we have to make it sound clean and polished and all that kind of stuff. So
Do you think you kind of start at one end and then like make your way towards the other?
that was my experience for sure. Yeah, it's like with dancing, like you figure out your footwork first, and you figure out like to stand steady and like have a good stance, and then you can worry about looking clean, completing your moves and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think you're more of like a, actually, again, like I've worked with you and I think you definitely know more about like audio engineering than I do, but would you consider yourself to be like pretty serious about the audio engineering side of things?
I mean, like I know the like basics of it, like basic compression, equalization, which we'll talk about as well in more detail. Those kinds of things are important to a mix. Just you want the listener to not experience distortion or like too much bass or too little bass or whatever. You want it to just be constant throughout. You want there to just be constant levels. And like the flow should come not from the songs, but from whatever's happening in the background. That's kind of been my experience with it. Where I want people to latch onto a beat that's going on in the background and just let that beat ride out. Even if we change from like a fast like stop segment into a jog, into tumor, like all of that should be constant. The bass line should bump when they need to bump. When they're just chilling out, like you should still have them kind of like prominent. Makes sense. I don't know if that made any sense, but
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's like I think the that listener aspect that you pointed out is like very important. Like everyone starts out from that listener point, and then let's say they decide to pick it up. Like for me, for example, like I remember like when I made my first mix, it was literally two songs put back to back. There was no layering done whatsoever, and I was like, oh, this is but you the thing is, like, if you're willing to like improve, and like if you're willing to like take criticism and such, and if there are people there to offer it in a constructive way, and you're going to slowly like move along that line, and get closer towards
definitely.
you'll get closer towards making bootlegs, and yeah, it's always a learning process. Like I'm always learning still, so yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
So, like,
Mohit.
Mohit's there. Hey, what's up, Mohit?
Hey, hello. What's up? Sorry, I forgot.
Nice.
Hey, what's up?
It was 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yes. All right, we're all in different time zones, so honestly, I'm impressed we're all here. So Job.
West Coast gang, let's go.
Hey, welcome. You want to introduce yourself?
Me? Yeah, hey. Yeah, I'm Mohit. I live in California. I'm usually very late to things, so this is not an exception. And yeah, I guess if you know me from mixing, I go by MOMO on SoundCloud, which is a little bit of an embarrassing name, but it's too late to change it.
Embarrassing. I think it's sick.
And who have you like danced for, mixed for? Like, what's your mixing situation? We were just talking about how I'm much exclusively an in-house mixer. They is mostly a for hire mixer. Shrieker's done like some of both. Where do you fall on that spectrum, and like who do you kind of affiliate with?
Yeah, so I started dancing actually when I was a freshman in college, or like at least started dancing like at a higher level for KRRN. And so I was on KRRN for 4 years. I also danced with NSG and most recently Gabru Gulavarge and also Jaddi Giovanni, who are two teams from California. And then for mixing, I started mixing really seriously actually only after I graduated college. So actually it's not been that long. It's only been like 3 years. And yeah, I was always involved with like the mixing process when I was like captain of Cal, but I only started seriously mixing afterwards. So I guess I kind of have always just been like a for hire mixer, I guess. But recently with like GGW and Jaddi Giovanni, I've been like kind of acting as an in-house mixer. So yeah, kind of the whole spectrum.
Cool. Actually, now that you're here, I have a question that I wanted to like point at you to start, and then you guys feel free to jump in. You have like a pretty solid musical background. You want to talk about that and like how you approach mixing from that perspective? I know it's because like I've worked with you before when you did Theories Mix, and the way you talk about music is definitely from a more like technical standpoint, even from like a music theory wise, than I think a lot of other mixers. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So like I guess yeah, I have a little bit like of a long musical background, like not in Bhangra music, but in jazz actually. So I've been like involved with playing jazz guitar since I was I think like 10 years old, and I actually played at Berkeley as well as part of their jazz program. So I guess because of that, like my theory has always been really solid, and I've always like listened to a lot and like played a lot of music. So I think that definitely has helped with mixing. So I actually before I started mixing, I didn't really have any experience with like actual like electronic production, like using DAWs and stuff. But the good thing is that like when I would sit with my brother and we would do like the cow mix and I would just watch him, like I could give a lot of input just because like I understood things musically. So I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I would say a lot of times when I'm doing music, I'm not actively thinking like Bhangra mixes. I'm not actively thinking about like scales or anything. But I think by just like being around music a lot, you kind of intuitively understand things like pitch and like what sounds right and what sounds wrong.
Great. How much music, and this is I guess some for everyone, how much music you kind of need to like understand, not like how many songs do you need, like how much do you need to understand music you feel like as like a concept to like before you start mixing, and how much can you pick up on the fly, how much does it affect your mix, how much do you feel like it affects other people's mixes that you listen to, which I want to get into more a little bit later, but like what's your guys feeling on that? Anybody?
So I think the biggest thing first is, you know, if you're gonna mix, like the biggest musical bit of knowledge is just like make sure that your samples are all in key. I think that's like probably the number one thing that people expect you, or like the biggest thing that you want to that's gonna like make your mix you know, good or not is if it's not in key, then you can just completely forget about it. Um, so that's the biggest thing. And if you don't have musical knowledge at the start, it's not tough to get started. I would say like the amount of musical knowledge you really need to make a mix for a dance performance is not super like it's not like ridiculously high. It's but you do need some, and you know, a good way to start learning, in my opinion, would be to like start mixing and start reaching out maybe and being like, yo, what do you think of this? And otherwise, I don't know if there's any other resources, maybe tech, something.
Yeah, of course. I think you're absolutely right. I think key should definitely come first, as opposed to anything else. But more importantly than key, you have to look at the scale as well. You have minor and major scales, and you really cannot mix the two. And even if they're technically in the same quote unquote key, like you play the same piano note and it matches both instrumentals, it's not going to work if one is minor, if a minor key instrumental is going on a major key song, or vice versa. So that's something that you just have to kind of understand. If a song sounds sad, it's probably minor key. If it sounds mean, it's probably minor key. If it's sounding kind of happy, then you're going to probably classify it under the major key side of things. And that's something that I've noticed a lot of DJs nowadays are struggling to kind of figure out, is making sure that every single chord and note within a 4 or 8 count phrase matches every note that it's placed underneath of. And
Right.
that's something that I think, of course, if for amateur DJs, like, it's very hard to like train your ear to figure that out. It took me a really long time just to get the key right, I remember. So it's very important to just keep sending your stuff out to people that you know are going to be brutally honest with you, or going to give you the best feedback that they possibly can, because that's what's going to help you the most. Not just your friend who's going to be like, yo, that was dope. And like, it's just like hi-hats, like, I don't even know, like snare, just like littering your song.
There's so many of those mixers now. Like there's so many. Actually, I want to say now if like some have dropped off. There has been so many. I feel like in 2017 and 18, there was that influx of mixers. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was like everyone and their brother was mixing, and it was just you something up a couple like semitones and throw a bunch of like hi hats on it. So then it's like the mixes just runs away and then it's over and everyone's like that was fire, and like I feel like everyone, like no one showed their mix to anybody, they just showed to their friend who said it was fire, and then that's where that whole generation of mixers must have come from.
I had a friend whose dad actually was watching him compete at a comp, and before he even got a chance to get on stage, his dad walked out of the auditorium because he's like, yo, there's just too much bass going on, like couldn't stand it, there's too much. And he literally left the auditorium until like his kid was about to perform. But like the audience definitely notices these things. Just because a mix bumps in your car and like destroys your subs and like everyone on the road is looking at you, it doesn't make it a good mix. That's something that I think people have to understand.
Okay, so what makes a good mix?
Right.
All
So I
mixes
think
sound different, so I want to know what each of you feels like makes a good
this is
mix.
purely subjective to like the way I look at it. I think number
So
one,
so what do you like in a mix?
so like I said, I think pitch and key should definitely be something that shows good audio production and good ear. Like I said, I think more so than that, we're on the same level. I think I judge a DJ based on how well he or she listens and what their library looks like. So you have a lot of DJs who aren't necessarily great audio producers, but since they have such a vast library of songs, they're able to charge a lot of money for their mix. They're able to like rake in that that profit just by like putting a couple layers of drums and or like a synth line or something like that, and just like over and over again in the mix. But the songs themselves are really well selected, and they're like songs that no one's ever heard, and they're really putting the circuit onto these songs.
Who are mixers that you feel like kind of fall into that category?
Like a lot of the people coming out of Toronto for sure. Like they have a lot of, they have like kind of a template. Where it's like, all right, we know we want to add toll, like hi hats, bass, snare, cool. Make it work. We'll add it all in. It's very like basic audio production work. They're showcasing songs like the public. They're showcasing songs to the circuit that maybe people haven't heard in a while, or haven't heard at all. And songs that, like, you see in the SoundCloud comments, people asking about, like, what's this song? What's that song? And I think that's something that mixers should really strive to do as well. Is like, not only do you build your audio production like mind, build your library. You build your library as well. build those, you mix those basic songs, right? The songs that you hear in every mix, like right now is Bambiha Bole, like every single mix is gonna start with that or have it at some point in it. But you also want to have those like intricate kind of segments in there that are just like, wow, I did not see that coming. That was a very interesting song. That was very interesting song choice, but they made it work, and I think that's something that definitely goes a long way.
Mohit, what about you? What do you feel like makes a good mix? What do you like when you're listening to a mix, at least?
Yeah, I totally agree with the like song section. I think the song section is like super key. And yeah, I mean, if you're just using like, I mean, if you're just using all of like the hit things that are hits right now, then it's probably going to be a miss for me because you're missing out on like such a rich history of music. But if you're also just doing kind of like random songs but not using any hits now, it's probably also going to be a miss for me because it's old and like you're not taking into account the new cool stuff that's going on. So yeah, I think the song section is really important. And I guess for me, like, I mean, I'm really big on just like kind of the melodic aspect of mixes. Like if something is just slaps all the time, but like there's no kind of like cool, interesting layers that are going on, like I probably won't listen to it. And then I guess like one extra thing for me that like puts out the DJs that are like really good is just like variety, like being able to kind of just mix it up. Like I really, really appreciate when somebody can put out like just something that absolutely slaps and then follow it up with something that's just kind of scenty and like really delicate. And I think that's really hard, and it just shows that like a mixer has chops. So yeah, those are probably my favorite thing. Also, sound quality. Like I can't listen to something that sounds like shit. So
So
Absolutely.
what can you explain what sounds like shit means? Because I feel like this is a thing that like you mean from like a technical aspect. I'm not sure everyone that's listening is gonna know what to look for when they say something.
yeah, I mean, like I guess like for if you didn't really like know too much about mixing, what I would mean is just something that sounds professional, kind of on all speakers, versus something that doesn't. And I think there's varying levels of that. Like I would never expect a mix to be as clean as like a regular song because there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and you're working with original songs and having to like kill parts of it. Um, but I think what's clean is that it's something that you could listen to, you know, like in your headphones or on your car or on your stage, and it's something that just seems very well balanced. Like you wouldn't listen to it and nothing sticks out in the wrong way. So I mean, technically a lot of that has to do with like your mastering, how you pan, how you EQ, how you use compression, how you sidechain. I think there's like a lot of technical things that go into that.
I think just like for examples, because you're alluding now to like it's like the levels of things. I feel like that's something that's actually a pretty easy thing for people to pick up on if you're listening to a mix and you feel like your bones are rattling because the bass is so heavy. Like that's indicative of probably someone who just amped up the bass too much and didn't balance it out with the rest of their sounds. Like you're overpowering. And
Mhm.
honestly, chances are when you go on stage and you play it out over the system, which you're not going to get a chance to test over a system, right? So go ahead and
Mhm.
play it over system, you're not going to have the mix hit the same way. Similarly, if you have like hi-hats, those like really high-pitched drums lines, if they feel like they're kind of knocking in your teeth when you're listening, again, that's too high. And probably when you get on stage,
Mhm.
I've been on stage with a mix that had the hi-hats were too high, and you could almost not hear the music because it's not coming through underneath, and that's obviously a real problem for dancers. So balance is like really important that way.
Uh, Yeah, I think one of the underrated things about mastering is that like, yeah, I mean like every speaker and every like sound system kind of plays differently. Like all of them are preferential in different ways. Like for just like as you alluded to on stage, like there's boosted lows. Whereas when you're listening to like just through your phone speakers, there's clearly not going to be any low frequency. So it is like a little bit of an art, and not just art. You have to like get a lot of people to listen to your tracks, and you need to like take the efforts. Like for example, like if I'm posting a mix, like I make sure to listen to it in my car, on my phone speakers, on my AirPods, like on my mixing headphones, on other setups. Because like if you truly get a mix that's like poppin', then it's gonna sound good on everything.
Shrikern, what about you? What do you like in a mix? What do you think is interesting?
Um, Interesting, I would say is like definitely variety. You know, showing that you could really shake things up, do something different with something. Um, and I will not listen to a mix if it sounds like off key. I'll just be like, all right, next track. Same thing. Like I think Mohit, what you said about it shouldn't sound like shit. I think I kind of agree with what you're trying to say there. Like there's a certain sound quality to it that that I I want to like I want to be able to appreciate the sound quality the minute the music starts. I don't want to start a track and then just feel like, okay, this is getting somewhere. I don't want to think about the mix too much, is what I'm trying to say. I think
Where does
I
that
think
go for it? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, you were saying.
Sorry, Freakon, go for it. I didn't realize I was not for it. Keep answering.
Oh yeah, I was just saying. Earlier when I was talking about, I'm not able to listen to a song without, thinking about, all the elements that are going into it and all that, whatnot. So when I'm listening to a mix, I know if I truly like it, if I don't need to be thinking about all these things, and I can just appreciate the work of art that it is. And very few mixes really do that, and very few mixers consistently do that.
Yeah, it's like
what
we're
is-
not here to reinvent the wheel, like we're trying to build a better vehicle to use those wheels, and that's what kind of in any art, that's really just what pushes it forward. You have to find something that's unique, that everyone can latch, but something that everyone can latch onto at the same time. Like everyday average Joe that knows nothing about mixing should be able to listen to something, even if they don't recognize the song. There should be something that they can latch onto in it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Right.
just that's the conundrum that we live in,
Yeah.
not only as DJs but as artists,
And sometimes
you
while you're
guys,
making stuff, you
think-
listen to it so many times that you lose track of whether this thing is even good anymore. And at that point, you're like, shit, I need to start reaching out to other people.
What do you guys feel like? I guess one thing that makes the sound, we were talking a little bit about sound quality, right? Things sounding polished. One of the things that goes into, or I should say, two of the things that go into that are making your proper EQ and then mastering. I think those are two terms that people don't necessarily understand. So, one of you want to explain what each of those are and how they're different?
I guess I could take a stab at it. I mean, uh, like I guess you can think about sound just in terms of frequency. And there's just I guess a certain subsection that's just audible frequency. And so things that are low frequency be things like bass and stuff, and vocals usually sit in the mid frequency, and then things like hi-hats and maybe really high synths, those go in the high frequency. And kind of within a track, there's only so much space in each part of the frequency for competing sounds. And so what you can do when you're EQing is you can essentially on each individual part of your mix, you can kind of change what frequencies are filtered through. So you're essentially filtering certain frequencies, which can involve either bringing them up or bringing them down and removing them. And so when you're doing an EQ on a mix, you kind of want to do that on each track so that all of it just fits together like puzzle pieces. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, it's like with EQing, it's you have, like Mohit said, you have different frequency levels. Your most basic EQ will probably have 3 or 4 different frequency levels that it'll be able to differentiate. And your low ends are basically your bass lines, your mids are your vocals, and your highs are the hi-hats and stuff like that. But things that can also go in the mids are synths, and synths can go throughout the entire thing. They can be in the low ends, mids, or highs. So typically you're going to find clashes amongst competing hi-hat lines or competing synth lines and vocals. And of course, if you're putting 2 tracks on top of each other with heavy bass, the bass is really going to clash, and that's something that is going to cause the most obvious kind of distortion for the listener. Or that's the kind of thing where your subs are just going to blow out in the car. So you want to be able to identify which bass line you want to keep, and what I do is boost the bass on that, up the bass on everything else, bring the vocals up in the vocal piece. Then as far as the hi-hats go, that's typically a kind of situational there. It depends on the pattern, but I actually like to bring my hi-hats down overall, and just let them ride in the background, not take over too much.
If you want to contrast that, bring the hi-hats down to other mixer styles. So a lot of the Toronto mixers, for example, they will actually have a preference to raise their hi-hats. And I think so now, but
It's very-
definitely like
it's
West
an easy
Coast
way to
teams.
make your mix very progressive. That's the thing about
Yeah.
hi-hats.
Yeah, and I think like West Coast teams for a while, at least now, again, mixing styles are changing. But I definitely felt like for a while it was the Toronto scene that was very like preferential towards hi-hats. They would, I don't want to say neglect the bass, but the bass would not figure as heavily in the mix. Whereas West Coast teams for a lot of times, for a long time, I think they sit more heavily into that bass, and then the hi-hats would not necessarily um, rely on the hi-hats to carry the mix. But do you think that's accurate?
Sorry, could you say that again? The
I
part
was
about
I was saying that West Coast teams for a while, I don't know if that's the case anymore, but West Coast teams would rely stylistically more on the bass to drive the mix as opposed to the hi-hats. And like just as contrast, Toronto mixers would rely more heavily on like hi-hats to drive their mix.
yeah, that's I mean, I don't really know. I can't really speak for the whole West Coast scene. I think the West Coast mixing has like gone through like crazy transition in the last like 15 years. Like I think like you had like back in the day, like people were just doing like kind of like OG tracks, like super heavy on the dole. Then yeah, I think it got kind of like a little bit blended with the Toronto style. I don't know, right now in the West Coast, I feel like we have some of the most diversity of mixers probably like in the world. So I'm not I don't know. I'm a little scared to make like a West Coast mixer assumption. Maybe
I
I
would
don't.
say okay, maybe not West Coast mixer, but like West Coast teams, like wherever they get their mixers from. Like I feel like there's definitely a particular. I don't know, if maybe this is not the case. I've felt like a lot of West Coast teams at least, because they tend to pull a lot more from like the West Coast hip hop and rap scene,
Mhm.
and like if that's where you're getting your samples from, sounds in there
Everyone
are
has
more
used those,
like.
right? Everyone has used West Side Story. Like
I
the
think
West Side
more
beats are
now.
the
I
original.
don't know that that's like maybe I just am listening to older mixes than are like coming out now. But now it's different. I definitely admit that like now it's different because now so many more mixers are getting hired by so many different teams, so the styles are totally crossing over. Um, there was definitely an era where a lot more teams had in-house mixers, and so I feel like um, in times like that, like I want to say this was probably like 2012 to like 15, maybe 2012 to 14. You could very often kind of pick out roughly which team or which sub circuit a team was from when they started. Is that like too hot of a take and no one else agrees with me? That's also fine.
Oh, you just cut off. You repeat that
Oh,
last
that's
sentence
not
again.
good. Oh yeah,
Sorry.
just like when you could kind of like tell for a certain area of time. I would say 2012 to like 14 or 15 by listening to like the mix, roughly like where the team was from or like which style they kind of went towards. Maybe that's because a lot more teams during those years had in-house mixers. No.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I think one like great case study is boy Pablo Mix, man. This guy has like really taken over the scene and like really like made some waves in ways that like other DJs just haven't. And that I say that because and I think he's comparable to like classics in that sense because classics was mixing for people all over the country, like all over the world since the beginning. He was sitting in San Diego making mixes for Drexel, you know, and Cornell, and like and Pablo Mix is arguably doing the same thing where he's kind of got this monopoly on the circuit where he's making mixes not only for American teams, he's making mixes for NJ, which you know relied on in-house mixers since the very beginning. So I think I see where you're coming from. Like I think now it's have a lot more standardization of styles now. If you really dig deep into it and like look past all the team mixes, I think there's even more diversity now than there's ever been. That's just because it's easier to like access software and it's easier for people to get started now.
Yeah,
And the
definitely.
software itself is so nice.
I guess this is maybe a good time to ask about how you guys I guess everyone should take a stab at this one. How do you guys develop? We get a lot of questions around style. So how have you guys developed your style? And I don't know if anyone listening is interested in starting mixing or maybe would learn something from this answer, but what recommendations would you maybe give to someone where they can find their own style? I know a lot of us pull from the same packages when it comes to loops and stuff like that, and a lot of us are working with the more popular hip hop samples and rap samples and all of that stuff, and whatever Punjabi tracks are hot. But like, how do you take all those elements and kind of make it your own? What goes into developing like your own style? Grant, you want to start this one?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know what exactly I could say about how to develop your own style, but I'll just sort of like explain what I've been doing. Like I don't even know if I have a style, like um and I do know that like I do know that a lot of other mixers have been labeled I've been given like, oh, this person has like this particular style, this person like has like very nice like bass line in every mix, and like I don't know like if I fall in any like style category, but I would say like what my approach to it is always just I think about the quality of the sound from like an audio engineering perspective, and I think about where every element needs to be, and I just think about an overall balance for the mix. And if I achieve that balance from a pure engineering, mix down standpoint, and then the song like hits, like the drop really hits, and like all like the layering and like small little nuances are like a little bit are like recognizable by like someone that I played a track for, then I know I've done my job. So I don't really like approach it from like a style perspective. There are certain creative decisions you could make along the way. Like if you want like a more folk mix, I'm always gonna like, say, oh yeah, you gotta like draw more attention to like folk elements like, dole and thud and all that. But if you're going to, go for a more modern or like, more hip hop, like, like try to bring the focus more on like the drums and the bass line, then that's another direction that you could go creatively. But like I think regardless of any of that, just try to go for balance in sound, and try to aim for the best sound quality you possibly can, and you'll probably find your style along the way of doing that.
What about you?
Definitely, like I think it's very important to find that unique identity as any creative. And the best way to do that is kind of study what's been coming out and study what's come out in the past, see what people like, see what people want to hear, and based on that, you build your sound around it. I think three of my biggest influences, I'll say, are classics, Hermanthur, and G-Sing. I think those three by far like taken G-Sing's like and Hermanthur's like I don't know, cleanliness and just like the amount that they can make their mixes pop, and then Hermanthur's like harmonies, classic song selection. That's basically like how I would break it down, and kind of just like studied their mixes a lot for the longest time, and just decided, all right, I have my own library of music, I have my own thoughts, my own inspiration that I get from this, and I have my own sound that I'm trying to shape as well that I know I want, and based on like the inspiration that I have, I'm able to make like mixes now, and just kind of showcase like what I listen to and like what my personality is those mixes. And I think if you're able to do that, then you're able to stand out and you're able to get an audience to begin with.
I think having your own library is so important, right? Because like if you're just working from the same sounds that are there in whatever mixes you're listening to, like you're not, if you don't have your own music that you like and vibe with to pull from when you start to pull out like samples and stuff like that, you're not gonna make anything that's your own. That's definitely how I feel. Like I most mixers that I talk about how they're just always stashing music, even if they don't have a plan for what mix it's gonna go in. Library just in case they get hit with an idea like down the road whenever they get asked to make their next segment.
Exactly. And at the same time, you have to look at mixes that are coming out now that don't hit. That mixes that you listen to and you're like, wow, this is not good at all. And like those non-examples are arguably even more valuable to you than the inspiration itself. It's like I know that this isn't working for these reasons, and therefore I'm going to keep an eye out in my mixes to avoid these things from happening, because these things just got overlooked in this mix. And I'm going to make sure I train my ears in such a way that I can look out for these.
What about you? What's your style, and if you have any tips for someone to develop their own?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really even know what my style is. Like, I just know that I've always really like layers in music. Like, I like when there's lots of melodic kind of elements. Um, and I guess that just kind of plays into what has like eventually become my style. But I think yeah, style is something that you do from just like making a bunch of mixes. Like, I think every mixer would tell you that like if you go back and listen to your mixes from 3 or 4 years ago, it probably sounds like shit. And like I just think it's like part of the developmental process. Like you just kind of naturally land on the style. But yeah, like kind of what everyone else brought up, those are all really great points. Like kind of like listening to people that you really enjoy, and then also just collecting music. Um, I think those are all key elements. Yeah.
Actually, so you and I had talked about this like very, very briefly in like a separate conversation. You recently did Birmingham's mix
Mhm.
for TBIs, and like we didn't really get into it, but I don't know if you remember we were talking about how like that was just a really different experience. There's been some talk in like one of the text channels about like UK mixing styles. Um,
Uh-huh.
what was that like? Like what was that crossover like? I don't want to like speak for you, but I'm gonna like push you a little bit. I don't think that I think I remember you saying you didn't particularly like it, having to
Mhm.
like change your style. So can you talk about like what that experience was like, and if your opinion has like changed at all about the UK mixing of that?
For sure, yeah. So yeah, I did do a UK Birmingham for TBS. So I mean, I'll just first preface with the UK. I think I looked through the stream chat and there was some discussion there. I know the UK mixing scene gets like a lot of hate from from like American people, American teams, but you cannot deny that the UK people created this formula that like slaps, and like people obviously like it, otherwise no one would really listen to it. So I think they did influence kind of the American scene and other scenes to pick up some of the elements of what they were doing. Like yeah, like I get that the pitch is really controversial and the pace and how like all the tracks do sound kind of similar, but I do think that they've brought some really good things in circuit, and I can't deny like if you listen to some of the prop segments that I do, definitely has a lot of UK influence. Except that I don't pitch things that high. But yeah, and going back to the other question about how it was working for a UK mix. So I mean, like, I wouldn't say I didn't enjoy it. Actually, that was a pretty cool process, and like the captains, Ajay and the other captains were really cool, and like they had a lot of ideas. So I'd say the positives are that they kind of wanted me to choose from a very select set of songs that I normally wouldn't. Like they only wanted kind of like old school. They only wanted bangers. But yeah, when it came to the style, that part was a little bit hard for me because I did feel like I was being kind of put in a box. And like, I mean, you can go and listen to the mix and form your own opinion, but it doesn't sound like my other mixes. And like, you may or may not think it sounds as good. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that I've taken a step back from doing any team mixes outside of the ones that I'm dancing on, because I do feel like I don't like restricting my style anymore. And it's just not worth it for me to take a mix if I can't do it the way that I want to.
But I had a question for you actually. I noticed you and Amit, I think, were the only people who mixed for UK teams that weren't from the UK. Is that correct?
I think KSM did one, right? I think KSM
Yeah, I
did
know
it.
KSM has
Yeah.
done it. G Sing
Yeah.
has
Oh,
done it.
KSM.
Yeah. But
Sick.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, this. I think in the last few years, yeah, I think we were the ones who did it.
it's dope, man. We have to tap that market, you know, like
Yeah. I mean,
fact of the matter is everyone mixes the same there. And like someone has to
Yeah,
shake things up and show them that it can be done in a different way.
so
They also have
yeah.
to want for
Umar,
it to be done in a different way, right? Like
that's
they
the,
have to.
that's
So
the
yeah,
problem.
Mohit, can you talk about this? Because I know this is actually what you and I were talking about. This is what I want you to kind of like explain.
Yeah, I mean, people who like kind of. I mean, I think it's one of those things that like your biggest influence on both your Bhangra mixing taste and your dancing taste, it just comes from where you learned. So given the fact that in the UK they have a very distinct style of dancing, and they have a distinct style of mixing, that's kind of like all people know when they learn. So I could imagine that if I was somehow like born in London and I ended up growing up and going to college there and doing Bhangra there, I might also only like UK mixes and use that UK style of dancing. So I think it's just one of those things. But I think yeah, there's recently been some teams who are like down to venture out and get DJs from like the non-traditional sources. So I think that's kind of cool.
That's the difference between UK and Australia, right? Like Australia like looked to North America for inspiration. UK were like, nah, we're just gonna do our own thing. Even though I mean like what was that team? GCC I think was started by one of the SGPE guys when he was like studying over there. and I think he kind of like caused that spark, and they just took off running in their own direction after that, and never looked back. Yeah,
I
I
definitely
wanna
think
tap into
your
that market.
point about that, like, being if they Ram by the way says quick fact check. Ram saying that Victon start GCC, he coached the team
sorry.
and it was already there. Yeah, he did coach the team.
Okay.
He was affiliated, I
Sorry,
guess, while
yeah.
he was over there.
He helped them a lot. Like they did that one live set I remember back in 2012, and they were just like in SGPD like read me out like the whole time, and it was dope though. It was dope. Like it was cool to see their interpretation of the art.
Yeah, I think the thing that, like, Mo's point that definitely sticks with me is the fact that, like, you can want to, like, bring new fresh ideas into the UK circuit. Like, the UK circuit has to want to work with those ideas and vice versa. Like, it's almost counterproductive to hire, not that Birmingham did this, but in general, like, it would be counterproductive for a UK team to hire a North American circuit mixer and then say, we want you to do it this way, because then I feel like it's just, you're not really letting the mixer kind of mix their style and creativity, are you?
Say that again. The last sentence. Sorry.
Just not letting you're not letting a North American mixer flex their style or creativity. If you're a UK team and you ask a North American mixer to just make you a UK mix, and you're not open to, like, incorporating another style.
Right, and I think that's where Mohit, you and Amit like really did well there, because you guys brought your style and figured out how to adapt it to their style, and I really like that what you guys made. I think Amit made the St. George's mix back in like 2018.
That was incredible.
Very, very like very good song selection. Like because these
That was
guys
with the mask off intro, right?
Yeah.
That was
Or
so
that
good.
was one.
that was a Ferg intro or something.
I think he did 2 St. George's ones. I forget.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of them had a mask off intro. I know that.
Yeah.
The mask
Well,
off.
I mean, this is interesting. I mean, there's another element that we haven't really talked about, which is like how judges react to mixes that don't in the UK that don't sound like what they expect. So like, I mean, I'll just be completely transparent. My mix for UOB was definitely not in the top half of music scores. So I mean, it's also hard for teams to take risks in that category when judges. So I'm not saying that I should have gotten a higher score. I think it's just something to think about, like why people make decisions like on their mix.
Umer's asking if mix scores matter.
I don't think
I don't know.
Like
I don't know if it matters differently in the UK if the rubric is different, but like most North American rubrics, it's like points.
I have the TBS rubrics, and like obviously I don't think it's that big of a differentiator. Like I think you could pull out the mix scores and like everyone keeps similar places, but it's like if you lose by 1 point and it's because of your mix, it's like it's one of those kind of things.
I'm sure it also like affects like.
Yeah.
No, I guess I was talking to just like the pod admins. We were talking the other day about how even something like audience hype factor does not factor into the rubric, right? But you can't pretend like it doesn't make a difference. You can't pretend like so I'm sure that like there's not, you can only take off so many points on the rubric, but like if a judge doesn't if a judge has a bad taste in their mouth from the mix, kind of like it, you have to make that up with your performance. You're kind of working at a disadvantage there.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding like starting a brand new topic, like that's a really good point, and I think that it is important that like a mix kind of plays into the overall set, like and like all of the choreography and everything. But I really don't like it when rubrics have a separate category in terms of points for mix, because to be real, like most judges don't know more than the average person about the Bhangra mix. So why should they be judging mix? What Bhangra judges do have better than the average person is a knowledge of Bhangra. So they should be judging the Bhangra. And if the mix does affect and like the song selection kind of affects the choreography and affects the creativity, I think that's great. And that's something that they can definitely take into account. But just having like a 5 or 10 point section for mixes from somebody who knows nothing about mixes, that seems very silly to me.
Also, a large part of that I think also depends on the venue sound system. Another thing that's really hard to kind of pin down, but like I know lots of people that have like off stage or after the judges meeting and the judge was like, we couldn't hear your mix. the bass was too
Yeah,
high.
that's
Especially when
such a
like it's coming
problem.
from like a good mixer who did not overdo their bass, but the system in the room is such, or maybe like you didn't EQ properly, but then you go back and watch the videos because everyone's screaming their head off. Of course they couldn't hear the mix. And so it's like I wouldn't mind a mixing category if the mixing points were filled out after the fact when you just like sat in a room and listen to the mix in the headphones and you're like, I like this or I don't. But like that's not
Yeah,
the environment in which you're judging the mix. It seems really arbitrary.
I would recommend just like removing the mixing points and like just keeping like a separate best mix award, and like that's just easier, and it gives, honestly, you don't even need to like judge it during the performance. You can listen to the mix on your own time. Like a lot of comps are like starting to adapt this lately. But another thing like I would say is like when people complain about the bass being too like overpowering and such, it's still level playing field in a certain way. Like everyone's mix is going through the same presets and whatnot, and what I would say is like remember how Mohit was saying like his mix needs to sound good on his phone, on his laptop, on his headphones and whatnot. Then if
Aaron,
Yeah, you got to try it on a bunch of different mediums. Your headphones, your laptop, your car, other people's cars, a stereo system, whatever you have access to. Just plug your phone in and just like listen to it, see how it sounds, what you like and don't like about it.
yeah,
I wanted to
Guntul
actually
dropped
talk
a
about.
message in the chat. I don't know if you guys saw it, but he was saying how like you really should EQ for a venue, and I think that's definitely true.
I was
There
talking
is
to
that
Kuntal
other
about this
level
before.
of like sometimes I think you should EQ for a venue for sure, but like it's also different if like if some teams mix like blows out the subs like subwoofers, then like what are you gonna do? Things like that where it's like talking about like being
yeah,
out of your control.
I think at that point it's like that's on the comp, like and like the
Right.
judges shouldn't really be judging this, and that's more on the comp to like be like, hey, we messed up, so just throw this thing out of the rubric.
At the same time, I feel like judges have to hold like mixers accountable in that sense. I feel like judges really push mixers forward in that sense. I remember when I was making DCBC's mix back in 2017, judges were like, "Yo, your mix didn't go with your choreo at all. Like, your mix like actually hurt you a little bit." And I was like, "Okay, like now we have to go back and we have to see how we can fix that." I feel like that's why you have to have judges' feedback, and not just because of that. Also, what Kuntal was saying, if the mix is making your ears bleed at the comp, like as a judge, you have to call that out. If something's not in key and you can identify that, you have to call that out. If they're using inappropriate lyrics, call it out. And like I always think about it in terms of like theater productions. I don't see the orchestra in the theater just playing random notes, like just going all over the place. It's a very, very well thought out like part of the performance. And in fact, when it comes to a dance performance, it's more like important than the theatrical performance. The music is what's really driving your performance forward.
What is I guess that's another thing that like I guess would speak to the benefit of having a mixed category. I think that it's particularly useful if a mix is doing damage to a team. What is actually this is a good question. What is your least favorite mix? And or what is a mix that you feel like really did not help the performance out whatsoever? Someone's gonna have the guts to answer this question.
Wait. Can I, if you don't mind, could I like give you a counterexample to that of like a mix that wasn't so great, but like really well with the performance? I think
yeah, all the above.
I think BK mixes, especially recently, 2014, Bruin. Very, very like basic mix. 2014 at Bruin. The very basic mix sounded like it was made in like a week, but like it went so well with the set. It was impeccable with the set. And like any other team that had like some insane mix that they spent months and months on, so many drafts and all that, it didn't compare it because it did like their set so much more justice than any of the other mixes did their sets. And that's the balance you have to have, is like can't let your mix overpower your performance or vice versa.
For the rest of you guys.
Uh,
Um,
Actually,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Also, the thing, I do want to know about a mix that you feel like is like bad.
Bad. Didn't do anything for the performance.
And or was just bad.
You're gonna have
Just
to
'cause
come back to me.
I just feel like it's helpful because like contrast. I feel like a lot of people listening maybe like have their own preferences for like what they like versus don't. Like technically, not even technically, but like from the ear of a mixer, I feel like you look at or you listen to mixes with a different perspective, and I just feel like that'd be helpful to kind of contrast. We've already highlighted some mixes that we think were really good. But I think the other end of the spectrum is also like helpful to talk about. Gar and Mohit, either of you want to go?
I'm a
Think
little
it's amusing.
I think I'm hesitant to like talk bad about any mixer on like a recording, but
Oh my god, okay, I'll do it then. Like
Right, yeah, you lead the way, man.
so tag at what was the year the tag was just at Berg? Was it 20? Someone help me out.
18.
18? Yeah. Okay, that mix was. I'm not gonna lie, that was the worst fucking thing I've ever seen. I listened to it and I was just like, I don't understand what's happening. Maybe if I watch the performance, I'll understand all these random pauses and song switches. Like the songs were changing 7 times in one segment. There was like no continuity. And then I watched the video and I was like, oh, just kidding. The mix is so distracting that I can't even enjoy the performance. It was better once I muted the video. I feel like is very. I think that had a lot to do with the fact that like I don't know, I would assume that like the mixer just didn't have enough back and forth with the dancers, and then like maybe there was a mismatch between where the hits were in the music versus where the hits were in the choreo, or there was I have literally no idea what was happening. I don't know if you guys know what mix I'm talking about, but I just said
I think
that
I
was
do.
very strange. So I'm gonna just throw that out
One with-
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely
Anyone
agree.
who's listening and doesn't know what I'm talking about,
That was
is
ASG's mix.
in
Yeah.
the chat, yeah.
I remember he made a Tags Bruin mix as well. That shit was fire though. 2012.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the thing. It's not that he's a bad dancer. There's just like
No,
there's
no,
a
no.
lot of like I just had a massive fucking question mark when I listened to the set and I was like, I don't understand. Then I watched the set and I was like, I still don't understand. And I was just like, who let this get on stage?
Yeah. I would now that I think about it, I do have one. SPD
Here we go. All
at,
right, this is what I want to know.
yeah, SPD at Fever, I would say that mix was very underwhelming for that performance. Like especially when you compare it to their Big Ten performance, like even though the mix is like very like aggressive, I still say like it kind of slaps in its own way, and for that performance especially. But when you look back at like I think a couple weeks before Big Ten when they went to Fever, it was a completely different mix. But a lot of the songs were the same. But yeah, that was a very underwhelming mix.
This is Fever 2018.
It might be 2017. It was before Big Ten.
Okay, whatever year that was. Yeah, I feel like that's a like a kind of the way that I was just talking about with BK, right? Where it's like mix is not necessarily that stellar because the performance was so good that like makes you listen to the mix differently and look at it different.
Exactly.
With your last one, you got to shit on someone.
Somebody.
Yeah, man.
Spill
the tea.
Honestly, any mix that I put out before 2017 was complete trash. So you can go
Were
back.
any of your mixes out before 2017?
I deleted most of them. That's like when I started.
Hey,
Yeah.
that doesn't fucking count. You can't shit on yours all and be like, but I deleted them.
Yeah, you gotta delete them, dude.
I mean, I like if so like something where
The stuff I made in 2014 when I've been mixing for 3 months was garbage, but
Yeah.
like I'm not gonna say that.
like I guess like bad yeah, I don't know. Like I definitely think there's been like lots of instances of like the set being incredible and the mix being just average. But I mean, even in those cases, like any sort of really memorable set, the song selection at least was good. Because for it to be a memorable set, you needed the song selection to be good. So yeah, I can't really think of like too many off the top of my head. Yeah, I might have to pass on this question.
All right, well, Omar just brought up DRP at Brew in 2015 when they won, that being like another mix that was weird to listen to on its own. I definitely would agree with that. That was one that Basics did. Like I don't think that mix like from like an audio standpoint made as much sense if you did 2016, not 2015. Thank you, Sothaj. It was one that didn't necessarily make as much sense. You just heard it versus when you saw what was happening on stage. There was like a lot of, you really need to like rely on the visual to understand what the flow was. Right. No one has any answers to that.
Yeah, I know what mix you're talking about. It's I completely agree with that.
Is that
there's I don't think so.
Is that?
Gizzle that
No, that was Basics.
2015 was Basics?
No, 2016. This was 2016, not 15.
Oh wait, this was a good mix, right? Or are we saying it wasn't a good
No, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just that it's another one where it's like it doesn't necessarily make sense on its own if you just listened to the mix. Whereas like the song selection kind of feels like it's all over the place, and then like the flow isn't necessarily as obvious. But if you see the video, the performance was really good, and like it makes you listen to the mix differently if you know what was supposed to be happening on stage. So it's not really a mix that stands alone on its own.
That's interesting, actually. I heard the mix before I watched the performance, and I remember like all of us were raving about it because I thought it was super clean. I thought it was just really well produced.
Clean. It was very well produced. It was more, I think, relying on like production as opposed to sampling. It was super clean, but I just mean from like a. If you asked me to choreograph or dance to that mix, like I wouldn't necessarily know where to start if you just handed me. It's like that was probably one where there's a lot of back and forth between Six and the captains about like their vision, right? Where it's really tied to the. I don't know. Maybe not everyone feels that way.
I actually I think another example even would be like DDR's Bruin like that segment, the piano segment. I think if you're just listening to like a mix and that you come across that in between, you're probably gonna be like, yo, what the fuck's going on? But when you watch the
you actually worked on that, right?
Not me. I think Tag and Keisha.
No?
Mix?
DDR at Brew in 2018 ending.
Oh yeah. We did work
so you want to? I was just saying how like that's another example of maybe one where like an audio standpoint, it's a bit like don't necessarily understand like what's happening. You worked on that.
Like the performance, that was a very weird. Really enhances it.
Yeah, that was a very like weird segment musically. Like, can you talk about like what was happening there? How that came about?
That started off with this whole instrumental piece. I remember we had to. Keisha was listening right now. I don't know if you remember. We met up in a Starbucks like twice and like knocked this mix out before we both went to LA. And we basically were sitting there with these segments. Angela had all these visions, and we basically just had to figure out like how to complement those visions with some music. And so I'd say each segment really had its own identity, had its own kind of thing, and it like arguably was really all over the place in that sense. Like it's very like it sounded like if you're just listening to the mix, like you're gonna be like, wow, like what the hell is going on here? It's like we start off with this beautiful intro with like flute and like all these Punjabi instruments being like showcased. Then it goes into like this fast like kunda like segment with like some like lots of bass, lots of hi-hats, that kind of stuff. And before you know it, you're hitting like this really like soft drummer, and then going into that what was it, that piano segment, Merry Christmas, Mr.
No. After drummer was the mall segment, the
Mirza, right?
That set had a lot of instrumental. That's what it was. There's just a lot of instrumental in that. I would say a good I would even say like 40%, 30-40% of that set was just straight.
Were those all instrumentals that you guys pulled? I kind of know the answer to this, so I'm not really asking for my benefit. I'm asking for other people's benefits. But how much of that? We got a question. I feel like this is a good time to kind of ask it. Difference between the difference between sampling versus producing when it comes to like beats and instrumentals, and two, can you maybe outline how much you guys do of each of those, sampling versus.
I'd say sampling is like 70, and then production is like the icing on the cake. That's like 30. That's what I would say.
What about you?
I guess I don't know if I fully like. I guess like I don't really know what counts as production. So I guess personally for myself, like any sorts of like beats and stuff, I always do by myself. Like I don't really use loops or.
I think Ashrar, if you want to clarify what your question was, but I think this is kind of what he's getting at. Which is like, I mean, I pretty much do mostly sampling. Like I have packs of loops and or I will pull in like 808s and build out my own like baseline or something like that, right? But like generally I'm someone who relies more heavily on sampling. I don't take out a MIDI pad and build my own beats.
Okay,
So, like,
that makes sense.
What do you do? How much of that you build a lot of your own stuff? Like you use an Ableton pad and all that stuff, I'm pretty sure, right?
Right. Yeah, so drums, like I basically it's gonna be MIDI track on every single track. So I don't really use loops for that. And like yeah, just starting from like samples that I like kick samples at 808 snare, and then just kind of messing with those samples, using things like saturation, compression, and other stuff. So yeah, that is all I do on my own. And then when it comes to just like layers, like melodic layers, um, like I guess it just depends over the course of when I was mixing. Like when I started out, it was almost all pulled from songs. But like recently, I've just basically like I've gotten really into the sound of just like low bass synths. So like if you're not like into mixing, like a kind of a ref, the way that a bass synth is like if you listen to Metro Boomin or something, they always have like they kind of do like an A B kind of style of production where like the A side will be just all the beats, like like those hard 808s, hats, snares, and then the B section, like all of that will chill out and it'll just be a big kind of bass wave sound. And so I've kind of really got into that sound. So now basically on like every prop segment, I'm just lightly playing my own bass synth. So I would say like recently now it's a lot more production heavy, but previously it was a lot more sample heavy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Shrikran, what about you?
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same thing. So production wise, like I create my own beats. I create like the general drum patterns and whatnot, the bass lines and all that. I also like to like Mohit. I understand the sound that you're like describing. I too have like this particular like kind of like pads sort of vibe that I really enjoy in my mixes. So sometimes like once I decide on like a particular key for a mix, I just like layer a couple pads from like some synth on my DAW, and I just call it a day for like the production side of things. And then everything else just like arrangement of different samples, like melodic layers, like um, loops like Dole and Algozi and such Punjabi loops. I just rip from Punjabi songs, or from like something I found on BTF like 2 years ago. I'll randomly bump into it now, and I'll use those. Um, and yeah, I don't really know what kind of what kind of a split it would be, ratio for producing versus sampling, but these are the elements that I would say that I sample. It's just like all the Punjabi elements, and then if I want a particular song's backbeat, some prominent backbeat behind my Punjabi song, then that's the other element that I'm technically sampling because I'm taking it from a different song.
I like to grab my instrumental and use as much of that bass line as I possibly can as opposed to making my own. Just because every layer of that instrumental people are going to be able to latch onto, and I want there to be as much of that instrumental present so that people can hear it and be like, yo, like that just got mixed in, like I recognize that. But sometimes you're not going to get a great quality instrumental, and you have no choice but to use the weights and kicks and all that kind of stuff to kind of make it happen. The trickiest part about all of that is making your own loops and your own sounds in with the rest of the mix that has sounds from pre-existing instrumentals that are so like well produced and like they're professionally mastered and like made in the studio. And you basically have to sit here on your laptop and figure out how you're going to make it all mesh together. And sometimes even like take like you have to talk about side chaining as well. You have to like mix your own beats, your own drums, your own bass line underneath a pre-existing bass line from a different song. And you have to figure out, how do we get those two bass lines to mesh together so it doesn't sound like they're clashing.
Also goes back to what we were talking about earlier with EQ, right? Where it's like if everything roughly divide like the EQ spectrum into like 4 or 5 buckets, let's say, if you just take a Punjabi song that's well produced, it is going to occupy the whole spectrum. If you take another instrumental that's well produced, it is also going to occupy the whole spectrum, and you just kind of have too much noise coming through all the time. And so that's why you have to do these things that like you have to choose where your bass is going to come from. If it's not going to come from either of those two tracks, maybe it's going to come from another bass line that you're going to build yourself, like Mohit and Shrikar. So that's why you can't just like layer stuff on top of each other as it comes out of the box and expect it to sound good. And similarly, I think with like melody, right, where like Punjabi songs have melody built into them, right? Like they have all of them, but especially some of the ones that are heavier on melody, then have to, I think, probably choose your instrumentals accordingly and choose which is gonna where the melody that really carries that segment is going to come from. Is it going to come from the original track, or how do you maybe adjust levels so that you get a little bit of both carrying through and neither one is overpowering the other? But there's always those little adjustments you have to make so the sound is well balanced overall.
Yeah, I really love the harmonies. Like I dig deep to find instrumentals that have insane synths. What comes with that is like you have to be very precise with it. You have to make sure that your synths are each chord in that synth is like matching up with every single note and chord in the Punjabi song that you're mixing it with. And that's arguably one of the hardest parts. You have to not only understand the key, you have to understand scale, you have to understand rag. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And
you guys talked about this. Kuntal's brought this up a couple times, and I want to get to this. So his question is, can you talk about musicality? So that's like chord progression that has to do with things being talk a little bit about things being out of key or in key and all of that stuff. But I think you're talking about like matching chords and stuff like that. So can you talk about that? Key signature, chord progression. Talk a little bit about overlaying rhythm. I guess just now we're talking about those layers that hit. Which, by the way, I know we got this question about like how many layers and what layers. We basically just, I think, all agreed on is that there's no set number of layers. It's just about a well-balanced mix. So if you're going to spread the well-balanced over like 5 or 6 different tracks, as long as they're all occupying different parts of that spectrum, good. There's no set number. You just have to make sure it's balanced. Right.
you have to think of your. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
If you want to jump in actually on this musicality question and talk about like how all these other things like chords and key signature and chord progression, how those things are important, how those figure into making it good, go for it.
It's all about the headspace, and I like to compare it to a box, and this goes for production and mixing alike. You want to fill this box as much as possible to the level that you're comfortable with filling it, and you'd get to choose the level to which you fill that box. Now, you can put different items into that box which represent the layers. You can put a bunch of small layers into there that are going to combine together to build everything in that box, or you can just use 2 or 3 just big layers that are going to do a lot for you in terms of headspace. You have I know a lot of pop songs from like 2010, like in that era, like Jason Derulo, Ayaz, like those tracks used to really have a lot of synths and a lot of harmony and stuff going on. And when you put that behind a Punjabi song, there's almost nothing you have to do, and your box is basically going to be filled right away. However, if you're using something that's just like Non-Stop by Drake, for example, it's just a bass line. I want to put a bunch of different things on top of that, so I'm going to find more and more different instrumentals to throw on top of that, maybe make my own stuff, and yeah, it's all about just building into that headspace and making a full sound. That's something that has to be emphasized for sure. You have to conduct a symphony at the end of the day here, and you have to make sure that it has its highs and low points, but every segment should have that high point where the box is completely filled, where there is that noticeable drop.
Great. What do you want to jump back in?
Yeah. I guess
starting to answer.
we're just talking about like melodies, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, when you're
It's not
mixing,
just melodies, but just also specifically how like music theory fits in. I don't think that like everyone needs to like studied music theory probably to the extent that like you have to be able to do a good job of mixing, but I do think that um the differences between a good mix and a bad mix that's most noticeable. We've all talked about how like things being like in or out of key is like really important. Or if the chords are not matching up, or the flow of chords, progression of chords in one song and the progressions of chords in the other song, if they're like in the same key, like those don't match. So they alluded to this earlier when it comes to like major versus minor and stuff like that, right? So you like roughly talk about those concepts and like how those figure in mixing, like whether or not you realize it, like those are things that make a difference.
right? Yeah, so I mean, like usually when you're mixing on a song, you're pretty constrained um to like matching the same key and chord progression that the song has. I mean, I think there's some special cases. I mean, I think there's songs where like the instrumentation is light enough that you can imply like different keys or like different feelings onto the song than existed before.
By
But
that
for
you
the
mean
most
it's
part, if you want
mostly
to,
vocals?
yeah, like it's mostly vocal or like, for example, like not to get super technical, but if there's a song where the chord progression in the song is mostly just centered on one chord, or if it's just like a 1 and a 5, so basically like two very neutral like tones in the scale, then there's a lot more you can do with it. You can put in like more types of progressions and like kind of imply your own chord progression on top of the song. But if there's like a chord progression, like there's a very common one, like a 2-5-1, like a very standard pop progression, and there's a lot of instrumentation around that already in the original song, then there's a lot less you can probably do with it. Like you kind of have to stick to it. So yeah, I mean, like I guess like the way I would mix is like the first thing I do is like I listen to a song. I don't necessarily think what the chord progression is, but I kind of just get an idea of like what the feel is of it, and you just have to make like a smart decision about how you want to layer that. Uh,
Good
so
examples of songs that are like heavier on progression or chord progression complexity, I should say. Um, Ones that aren't.
yeah,
I know they was just talking about like how like nonstop is like just baseline, for example, right?
yeah. Oh, are you talking about like American songs or Punjabi
It
songs?
doesn't have to be, just like something that people can kind of maybe think about and recognize as like the difference between.
Yeah, I mean, like if you pull out basically like any kind of like top 50 pop song, like they're all gonna have like pretty similar chord progressions. And like there's a lot of Punjabi artists that stick to similar progressions as well. Like I mean every Jordan Sandhu song is gonna have a similar chord progression. Every Surjit Khan song has a pretty similar chord progression. So like when you kind of like learn to recognize that, you can kind of do lots of matching. I mean, like that's why I like mixing Surjit Khan, because he uses such standard chord progressions that's very easy to like match songs to it. But then yeah, I think things that have kind of like more, I don't really have, unfortunately don't really have anything off the top of my head, but like
That's all right.
yeah, there are a lot of songs that kind of stick um to like single chord, or like, you know, a lot of older Punjabi songs. I mean, I can't even make that distinction because lots of older Punjabi songs were so much more rich in terms of composition than newer songs that I can't really even make like a distinction across ages.
Hmm. The other two, you guys want to jump in on that?
I think as far as Punjabi songs go, like they follow a few different rags, like which is basically just
I'll
a
probably
type of
explain
scale,
what a
right?
rag is. Yeah,
It's
for
basically
people who
just a
don't know.
scale. It's basically just a scale, right? And it's a style of singing. So you're gonna see a lot less diversity in the tunes and in the scales and rags within Punjabi music, which is definitely not the case when it comes to English. In English music, you have all sorts of time signatures, all sorts of different notes, accidentals, and all that kind of stuff. And that becomes the real challenge, because a lot of the time the songs that become popular are really off the wall kind of songs that are hard to mix with your conventional Punjabi song. That just and I feel like
You're talking
sometimes
about Western songs now, right?
Western songs, yeah. So let's see. So example was Wu Tang Clan's Triumph. That's a really nice instrumental. And I remember we were mixing it with a jazzy B song called Sucha Surma. Okay, and we basically had to figure out how to manipulate the chords in the jazzy beat, or sorry, in the Wu Tang beat, in order to hit the jazzy B songs. What we did was we literally took every single bar, 4 counts, and we pitch shifted it. that we actually manipulated each chord in the song because we loved the instrument that was being used. We really liked the instrument that was being used. We liked the chord, how it sounded, but the chord itself didn't match as it was in the original instrumental. We took each chord, changed the pitch of it to fit the jazz B song, and then we were able to make a product out of that.
Right. If you don't do that, then what's the consequence of that? How does that? I think it's something that you might not be able to necessarily put your finger on when you're listening, and you think that like something's off here, but I don't quite know what it is. Like, how do you recognize that like something is off there?
I think I'd listen to each and every note, like I mentioned, and just each and every part of that progression. If a progression is 16 counts, each 4-count phrase in that, like you listen to it and see, okay, does something sound off here? It might sound perfect. Typically, it sounds perfectly fine for bars 1 and 2, and then 3 or 4. In bar 3 or 4, there's going to be something. There might be something that goes off. Those are typically the issue areas that I have found in my experience. I like to go through in those bars and like see, okay, I really want to focus on that and see if my ears are working well enough for me to listen and like find out if chords are going off there. And in that case, I would either have to get rid of the beat altogether or pitch shift it so it actually matters.
Yes. Karen, you want to answer that at all? Do you have anything to add there?
Honestly, like, there's nothing more that I could really say to that. Like, you guys really hit everything on that.
You guys have any tips on finding? We just talked a little bit about how like the difference between production versus sampling and like how much of each of that you guys do. I think sampling tends to be more favored for like melodies, right? Where do you guys like what steps do you guys have for coming up with like unique samples? Because I think unique samples, thank you were saying earlier how unique samples help a lot with having like your own unique mixer. So do you have any tips for that?
In terms of so instead of looking at individual songs when I'm like listening, I really like to just look at the artist. If I like someone's voice or I like the beats that they rap on or sing on, I'm just gonna go on their Spotify profile and just spend some time and just go through their albums, go through their like discography and see like, yo, if they put out this song that has this beat on it, there's probably a lot more where that came from. That's one of the ways that I've been able to go and just find some really like underground stuff, especially in like Punjabi music. There are not really a lot of singers that make it in the Punjabi industry, like to the level of people like Diljit or like Ami Virk. But there are a lot that like put out these one-hit wonders and kind of just disappear off the map. You really should like go back and like look in and like see what you can find, because there's a lot of content out there that just has not been untapped. It's like a gold mine that hasn't been like dug into yet.
Right.
So I feel like that's probably how I find my samples for the most part. And of course, it's all the stuff that I've also grown up listening to. Like it's good to have that as like a basis. Like whatever CDs my dad was playing in the car as a child, and like whatever my friends were listening to in high school, and beyond. You know, really diversify your styles. Like I remember in middle school, I had the biggest like Green Day phase. Like I picked up the guitar and like learned every Green Day song on the guitar. And then come high school, I all of a sudden just fell in love with like Bhangra music. Like really started to research that more. Then I got more into hip hop, researched that a little bit more. So it's all about just like finding inspiration from different genres. Don't be too like narrow-minded and focus just on hip hop, Bhangra, pop. That's it. Like really see where, because these guys get their inspiration from somewhere as well. Like look back at like the 70s and 80s, listen to people like Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, and like find out about all these like really interesting cadences and chord progressions and patterns that you can try to emulate in your mixes and even in your production.
I think that's a huge thing. I think your mix will be more interesting if your music taste is more interesting.
Exactly.
I think that comes through a lot in the fact that Mohit, like you were saying that you play jazz, like that makes a lot of sense to me if I listen to your mixes. Not that you're mixing Bhangra and jazz, but like style, the cadence, like that is different in your mixes than other mixes, and that's probably because you also listen to music that relies on that more. Like I listen to a lot of rock music, I listen to a lot of electronic music. You'll probably hear like allusions to that stuff more in my mixes than you would in someone who doesn't listen to those things. It's not that you have to bring those things into your mixes, but that is if you're listening to like top 40 and you only listen to top 40, you're not gonna have a different sound. You're not gonna have unique mix samples or anything like that. Like you should just expand, I think, your musical palette.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, I've talked enough.
Karen, what about you? Where do you like go to for some of like your more samples?
Sorry, I didn't get that last part.
Where do you go to like draw samples and like what are your suggestions for finding like unique sounds to throw into your mixes?
Oh, like hipstrumentals, honestly, is like there's so much out there, like so many packs that like you couldn't possibly have gone through everything, you know, and you could always find some interesting stuff. Um, another thing is while people do like to use instrumentals of songs, like if the song is somewhat popular and you know just a little older, then you might be able to find stems for it, and you know using stems of songs will really like help help it you well so stems, for people who don't understand, it's basically every single layer that the producer adds to create that song has been sort of extracted into its own file.
Karen, I think you cut out again.
Sorry. So let's say you're listening to So High and you really want to extract that flute in that song, and you have access to stems, then you'll be able to get out just that flute, and you could use it in your mix, and it'll probably sound significantly cleaner in the mix than if you EQ'd it out from the original song. So that's another, and it'll sound like a completely different piece of music too, because you know it sounds better. So when in comparison, it's gonna be like great. So yeah, just explore like different sounds out there. You know, the World Wide Web. You have access to stems, to instrumentals, to producers who are trying to sell their beats, who upload them onto YouTube. If you're gonna rip music, you could even rip theirs, and try to create some interesting stuff.
If you guys are not keeping an eye on text chat, stream chat, dropped a couple links in and some sites from which you can grab instrumentals, these like samples and stems that we're just talking about. So instrumentals, got instrumentals, DatPiff, like these are all good places to look. Also a bunch of sample packs out there that a lot of mixers have, I think, especially if you're trying to get started and you want those basic sound effects that everyone kind of uses as the building blocks. I think if you ask any mixer, will be able to hook that folder that we all have. I'm sure we all have the exact same folder. And we all know exactly which one I'm talking about. Those loops have been making rounds for probably a decade now. What else can I? Also, if you guys like Trigger and they like, if you guys have any questions that you want to like us.
Go for it, man.
Now I was gonna see like what kind of like questions for each other, or like just
Questions for each other, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we did sort of like cover this in between, but like you know, some things that I'm curious about is like how many hours would you say goes into like your like creating your entire mixes for like a team? You know, how does it like affect your creative process when you have a whole like team mix to make in front of you?
It can be from like 30 seconds to like 3 days, man. Like I've knocked out like segments so quickly because I like just knew what I wanted to do going into it, and it just worked perfectly. And can just come up with a concept so quickly. sometimes you're just sitting there like night after night and like nothing is working. You're just like, damn, like I don't know what to do. Like, and you just have to kind of wait it out and like be patient about it. And sometimes like obviously it helps take a break once in a while and just like come back and listen with fresh ears. And, yeah.
Oh. Probably takes me one to think where it's like if I have an idea, knock that really quickly. I would say that I usually will wait a day or two before I send it because more than one occasion I have made something and thought it was really good, and then I go to bed and I wake up and I'm like, this is garbage. I think always just like
Yeah.
resting on it a minute and just making sure it still sounds good after the fact, and or like you sometimes you even take a pass at EQing something and then you come back later and the balance is not quite where you wanted it. You want to bring out different bits of the tracks. So I do think that it takes longer though if I've been given a song to mix. That happens like with DVRs where like there'll be a song that they want to use for a particular segment. If it's not a song that I've picked, sometimes it takes
Mhm.
longer for me to like find an instrumental that works because now I'm working with different constraints, right? Um yeah, that's about how long it takes me. I would say start to finish though. I also probably iterate more than other mixers because I don't like to template from other teams' mixes. So I think being in-house again as well, like there's way more back and forth between like I first send mix and it finally goes in the mix we dance to on stage. Yeah, I like to start the mix when I start practices. So that's probably a few months in advance. Mohit,
Yeah,
you.
I would say it's like huge range. Like it just depends like how much I care. Like which a lot of time correlates with how much creative freedom I have. And then also whether it's for a team I'm dancing on, like kind of what you mentioned. So I think like the like my GGW mixes probably take like 40 to 50 hours. And that's because it's a really tough crowd. Like I think with a lot like independent teams where like everybody listens to Bhangra all the time, you know, like people are going to be extremely picky, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that's why I'm usually happy with those mixes. So yeah, like that's probably it. It does, and it does take a lot of time, especially if you do kind of make every segment from scratch.
Yeah. It's that
So
much more rewarding when it pays off.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you like it.
I think also like the other reason that it's sometimes harder and like takes more time for in-house mixing is because like I think there's not that fear of like we can't tell the mixer to change, like don't want to like inconvenience them. Not that it's like an inconvenience, but I think when you don't know the mixer personally, and especially if you yourself as like a captain are not a mixer, it's a little bit harder to like go back and ask for what you want. Mohit, I know when you mixed for us for theory, like unfortunately for you, both the captains were mixers, and so like there's a lot of back and forth there. I don't know if you remember, but
No, I think that was a good thing. I think that was a good thing.
really, I felt like we were like annoying the shit out of you.
No. I actually think I didn't do as many edits for you as I've done for some others. So
Really interesting. I felt like we were asking you for so many edits.
no, it was good. I think the worst part about making your guys mix is that my laptop got stolen halfway.
I forgot about that.
Oh,
That did in fact happen. Yes. Oh, fun fact. Mohit like built our mix. I don't. It had to have been like just a couple weeks before BBC. Like it was close to the comp.
Yeah.
And Mohit was not responding to our messages, and we were like, "Fuck! Did we piss him off? We asked him for too many edits." And then he comes back and is like, "Just kidding. My laptop is literally missing with all of my
Yeah.
music, including your mix." He like built it from all of these like MP3s he sent us of like
Yeah.
mix drafts along the way. It ended up turning out great. So Mohit's the goat, but
That did not sound like your laptop had gotten.
Yeah.
I
Thank
know.
you.
I mean, the good thing is like our like WhatsApp group chat had all of the like MP3s in
Yeah.
it, so he could like go back and listen and rebuild.
Yeah, basically every segment in that mix was basically like a mostly made or like half built MP3, which this was not ideal, which I ended up just like pulling into a track and then kind of having to like layer on top of. So if there's something that doesn't sounds a little bit off, it's probably because of that.
Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was also I think a bit slightly different like mix of like
Mhm.
style for you.
Yeah.
Listening especially to what came out before and after you did that one.
Mhm. Yeah.
So Jising is in the chat and asked a question for the panel. It was your first ever mix. What were you thinking when you're making it? Did you ever post it, and what was the response? I feel like we're all gonna have fun stories for this because the first time. Also, Jising, if you're listening, do you mean your first like team mix or the first like mix we made? Anything you made? Oh man, that is like. I don't know if I talked about the first thing I made. The first thing I made was trash, and I didn't show it to anyone. The person who I showed it to said it was also trash, so that's that story.
I have mine. Mine was
yeah. I guess first let's talk about just like first thing you ever made. Then maybe we can talk about like first team mixes we made. First thing you ever made.
We'll say both.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, then I guess first team mix I made. First team mix I made was I only made half of the mix because the other half was made by First Class Beats, and my team would only ever switch out. We would switch out basically half of the set every semester. So half of the set was like segments that FC Beats had made for us the previous semester, and then so what was on my mind mostly was that I was like trying to do my own thing, but I also like my style was very different from FC Beats. So I was like most concerned with the whole mix sounding coherent all together with like cutting back and forth between my segments and Sojay's segments. So that was kind of stressful. I was like pretty young and didn't know what I was doing. But it's up on SoundCloud. It's in fact there. It was Columbia Booger at Berg 2017. Yeah, I think that was just mine that made it on stage against all odds. Streetgarden, you want to go? First everything. I can hear you, so we're gonna go to Thig.
Hello?
Oh, now I can hear you. Go for it.
Yeah, so first mix, right?
First mix, and then also first like team.
Sorry, what?
First mix you made, like first anything, and also like your first team mix.
Oh, yeah, the first mix I ever made was a 2-track mix, literally 30 seconds of the first one, and then it transitions into another 30 seconds of the second one. And I thought it was the best thing ever. And I thought I was very impressed with myself. And it was Qadr by Mankirt Aulak into Tanaka by Ranjit Bawa back in 2017. Yeah. And then the first ever team that I mixed for was New York University, NYU Pangada. Yeah, I don't think they competed anywhere. But yeah, that was the first ever team mix that I worked on. It was very interesting. I didn't know much. And you know, it was very helpful to like.
I think they also didn't know much, which also must have been.
Yeah.
I know.
They didn't know much either.
I know. I went to school in New York. I like know the NYU team like loosely, especially during those years. They were like a very very young team, so I can imagine that was also tough because like you don't know anything. They aren't not really able to give you direction. So
Exactly.
that mix on SoundCloud.
That mix is no longer on SoundCloud.
I saw you deleted a whole bunch of your shit, even your like Twin Cities mix from way back when. I think I that was the first time I like left you feedback was on your Twin Cities mix.
Yeah, that was
Back
again.
to look at like how much you progressed and it wasn't there.
I'm not even like I'm not proud of that. So I'm like, you know what? I want to rework it. So I'm like, you know what? I might. So I basically took down every mix that I still have the file of, like the original file that I want to like maybe someday just like go back and like try to rework with the existing layers that I have. So like this is where like I think Ram was talking about compression and such earlier, but yeah, because that's a completely side topic. But yeah, anyways, I took down most of my older stuff for space one, and also just I was just like, you know what, I don't want this out there right now.
Right. one of the other two want to go? First thing you made?
I can go. The first thing I ever made was on Ableton, like free trial in the engineering library at Berkeley, and it was a Rich Homie Quan Dole mix of Type of Way. It was trash.
Nice.
It was trash. And yeah, that never saw daylight. I think a few people have it. Like I think it's in my email somewhere. And then the first team mix, I mean, like I guess at Cal, like when I was captain, I used to like put together all the mixes, and occasionally like I would do like a segment, so it doesn't really count. I think the first full team mix, like I kind of as a favor did Emory Bangura, like shout out Nathan from Cal. Yeah, I did that. That was like, I mean, I kind of like I hadn't really fully started mixing then, so I don't know how much that counted. I think the first mix that I really did like kind of as like a DJ, like professionally, was like OMG Bangura.
That intro was so good.
Yeah, that
The
one
intro
was
was beautiful. If you haven't
Wasn't
heard
it
that,
Vibe?
Oh, you're right. I did Vibe before. I did half of that mix. Vibe, which is a team.
counts.
Yeah,
I also gave half a mix, so
yeah,
half
that-
counts.
that's like Academy in the Bay. But yeah, OMG was the first like full team mix. And that one was cool because like I mean I didn't really have any name for myself, but I had put out Vibe, but I actually got hooked up with that gig. That's an Australian team, by the way, for people who don't know. I got hooked up with that gig through a friend who knew someone on that team, and they really needed a mixer. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite mixes I ever made, and it was like one of my first. So shout out to that. So that's on SoundCloud.
One is up. That intro is beautiful. Highly recommend you. The rest of the mix is also good, but I am fully guilty of like the first like minute and then rewinding or skipping. I just like the first minute. It's so good.
It's very nice of you. Thank you.
Big, did you go already? What your first mix was?
My first mix I made in freshman year of high school, and I started it off with Kanda by Nirmal Sidhu, and ended it with Gabru Rangile by what's his name, Sani Sundar. And I remember specifically putting AK-47 shots during the chorus of that Sani Sundar song, and never looking back on it. That's not up anywhere. But as far as team mixes go, I think the first non-competitive mix I made was my high school team. It's called Kaum Punjabi. It was called that. It was like pretty stupid. Yeah, that was 2014. We had like a small little like cultural show function kind of thing. And then first competitive mix was AMG from Santa Barbara.
Yeah, was this for Bangura State of Mind?
Oh yeah, it was for that. It was for that.
It was at
and
that
CSUN.
comp. I was at
oh,
that
really?
comp. Yeah, I was at
Oh,
that
really?
comp.
Oh.
That's a fucking throwback. Yeah.
No, so a lot of those segments were taken from our high school mix from that year because
So
they were just like,
funny.
yo, yeah,
No
Nice.
idea.
Yeah. Like that works.
Yeah, I mean, again, if it were, let's see, what else do we have here? Question: do you think the future of mixing will be less team mixes and more mixtapes, or music for TikTok videos? Good question. He says parentheses something like Skechers.
I mean, I think that's a really fair question. I think I think team mixes, when you look at it like from like a time and money and creativity process, it starts becoming not worth it. Like as you do it for a really long time. Like I'm kind of like stepping out of team mixing and just going to regular stuff because it's just like
regular stuff. Do you just mean like doing like mashups and mixtapes for fun?
Yeah, or for me, it's just like doing things on my laptop and then never releasing it to the world. But just like things where like you can be a little bit more creative. So I mean, I think I don't know, maybe like other mixers can speak to that, but I feel like almost everybody like burns out after going super hard for a few years. So also
I think so, but I think the question is more like whether or not younger people are gonna like come in behind to fill that void. Historically, like every mixer kind of goes through that, right? Like I think you'd be hard pressed to find a mixer who's mixing prolifically now that was mixing, say 4 years ago, right? I think till now there's been kind of like a steady stream of people kind of coming in, but maybe people are not going to like. No, I don't know. I don't know if people are going to be as focused or motivated to like get into things like team mixes if the allure is more for like 1-minute Instagram videos or the TikTok videos, and like that's how mixes are go viral, you know?
I think it should like move away from team mixes, but I think team mixes are always going to keep getting better no matter what. So I feel like we don't really have to worry about that too much. Like as long as you're good at what you're doing, like you're gonna keep pushing the bar up, you know. And you're gonna keep creating more and more competition. Like I mentioned earlier, like as software becomes more accessible and just better overall, you have like compressors and stuff that are basically just as good as the ones you have in the studios that like actual professionals use, and you literally just have that right here on your laptop, and you can just do whatever you want with it. And I think it's very important for mixers to venture outside of the team mixing like realm, because that's the only way you're really going to grow. And I have such a love-hate relationship with team mixes. Like I always want to move away from them because I feel like it always limits your creativity compared to what you can do by yourself. And I feel like I personally perform my best when I'm mixing, but for myself by myself. Um, so yeah, I don't know.
Like we all kind of alluded to the fact that like in-house mixing, we prefer it. Like it definitely comes with its own challenges, but you know, we prefer it. And we like to admit it or not, our in-house like better. So if you're a captain of a team, and or I should say if someone else is a captain of a team and they want to shift from mixing from a for hire mixer outsourced to in-house, what are the main things that they need to do to build that skill like in
I think as someone who like grew as an in-house mixer from start, the biggest thing is look for like as a captain, look for passionate individuals. Like when you're an in-house mixer, you're not just the person who's mixing music, you know, for hire from just from the team you're like working with. And it's not the perk isn't just the fact that you have the accessibility that you have with the team, and like it really helps you when you're like going through the creative process and whatnot. Um, but when you're mixing in house, you sorry. Hello.
I can hear you.
I randomly got a call. Yeah. When you're an in-house mixer, I think like the biggest thing is you want to make sure when you're a captain, you want to make sure that the individual who wants to
You guys hear Shrikman or
Can't hear.
I can't hear anything.
hello, sorry, where did I cut off?
very beginning?
In-house mixers.
Yeah. So I was just saying in-house
So
mixers.
you're basically saying like you should find someone passionate like on the team. That's like the first criteria, right?
Yeah, that's like the biggest thing. Find someone passionate, and then find someone like that's looking at it as a you're helping out the team. It's like a big service to the team. Like that's what really motivated me to learn more when I was mixing, and it's something that picked me up whenever I made something that didn't really sound that great, or wasn't really like as impactful for like the set. Is that if you're passionate about it and if you look at it as like you're trying to help out the team here, then I think it's really not that difficult to pick up once you like go through the necessary steps, like first you need to understand how to pick a DAW and such, learning and understanding, spending the yeah.
About I think you're less of an in-house mix. Mohit, like for you, what were the things that like were there things your captains did that like made you more well positioned to um be like an in-house mixer for GW?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think the better, like I think the best example for me is actually like when like I was the younger dancer on Cal, we didn't have a DJ, and like so my brother, I don't know, Amit, if you guys know, he's legitimate on SoundCloud. Um,
Also
he
very good. Would highly recommend you check.
yeah,
I
he's
love
very
him.
talented. He's very talented. Basically I learned most of my stuff from him, even though he's my younger brother. But um, we didn't have a DJ, and so like the captains for Cal at the time, Reina and Kevin, they were basically like, why don't we just like go ahead and like go with Amit, and like you can help him and you guys can do it together. And then Amit ended up being Cal's DJ for the next 3 years. And then now he's like his own really good DJ in his own right. And that's kind of how I came up too. So I mean, I think as a captain, you really do have to be patient because you're not going to get excellence right away. Like, actually, I think shout out to G Sing. I think Amit used to like hit the like old Cal mixes to G Sing, and like G Sing would give like really, really good feedback on that. But yeah, I think like it's just a lot of patience. And then like now, like fast forward to just like GGW, where like a little bit more like established mixer. Like, I think it's cool because like as both somebody who's a participant in the set and making the set, like you can really make a lot of creative ideas come to life. So I think like everybody having an in-house mixer, like, you know, I can be sitting at practice and like if people aren't feeling something, I can like go over to my laptop and like tweak something, send it over WhatsApp, and we immediately dance to it and like see if like that comes with new choreo ideas. So I think there are like really real benefits to having an in-house mixer.
Right.
Yeah.
Ram asked the question, so Ram, I hope you answer if it does let one of the guys. We have surpassed 2 hours, so I think we can wrap this up. If anyone has any questions that they want us to like hear or anything that we touched on that didn't make sense, he wants to clarify before we all go, now's your chance. Hit the stream chat. We'll give it a couple minutes. And I guess one question that I have for you guys, maybe we can part on in the meantime. What is, I'm gonna say mix, but I feel like it's not the same. What's like a segment that you're super proud of? You just really like how it came together. I'm gonna say mix, but like mix is different, I feel like, because sometimes in a mix you have like different restrictions because again, you're working with a team, right? They have their own vision for the set. But like, is there a segment that you guys have done that you just feel really proud of?
Yeah, I would say just yeah. It's always usually like the last thing you did. But from whatever is out there publicly, I would say that I made something for like about a month ago. It's just a compilation of like some segments that I've made over the past year that I put out as a mixtape, and I was very proud of the first minute of it. You know, I really like tried to learn a couple of new things, and also the very last segment, I feel like I approached that a little bit differently from just for from my own personal standards. You know, I tried to like reach out to people and like get a bit of feedback to like improve certain aspects of it, and yeah, that's probably the last thing that that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of right now.
Cool. Mohit, what about you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough. I like a lot of my own mixes, but I think in terms of just like straight slaps, I think like the OMG intro that I did that you were referring to earlier, I really did.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember making it and just like I kept listening to it over and over again because I liked it so much. But I'm gonna cheat and give a second one. I did like one of the Chardi Giovanni mixes I did. I mixed this Bunny Gill song Area with Kanye, all falls down, and
That was recent too, right? That was
yeah,
HG.
yeah, it was like I think it was like a year ago or something along that. But I really, really like that because I just feel like when it comes to like how mixers mix instrumentals and stuff, we don't do enough like vocal sampling in the back, like cut vocal cuts and stuff. And like obviously I didn't do those cuts. That's all Kanye. I'm not taking credit for that. But just like incorporating that into a mix, I was like pretty proud of. And to be honest, I made that mix in like 20 minutes because there was so few elements to it. But yeah, I mean, I think that was really cool.
They
I would say my favorite segment that I've made is one that I've made with Lil Bog actually, Bags Q. We made a segment for VSB at ECS and Mod past season. It was the intro. We mixed the Kuldeep Monik like share kind of thing, which is like part of this really old like cassette tape that Lil Bog had.
This we did replay the IS song.
Oh, that was from the year before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This one was, so we mixed this with the song "ISIS" by Joyner Lucas.
Yo, I love that.
Yeah, a lot of people actually hadn't heard it. My cousin in India showed me that song.
Oh
Yeah,
wait,
I've been holding up.
Hadn't heard it.
On using it.
Yeah, so we mixed that with Kuldeep Monik with the composer Tchaikovsky, his song called March Slav, which Dolbog actually played in orchestra in high school growing up. So it all really came together well and like had this really, really cool sound to it that I really enjoyed. And like I'd say that's probably one of our like most proud segments.
This is what I was saying earlier, where it's like, yeah, drop it in. I was saying earlier where like it's, if you listen to like more music, you will have cooler sounds to pull from. If you listen to classical music, you will know where to pull things like Tchaikovsky out of, and like you also had that tape you made, the Borat one, where you put "Waiting on the World to Change."
Yeah.
By the way, if you have not heard this, one of my favorite things in like mixes always is when mixers have a sense of humor. Like, if you have a sense of humor, that's like very hard to replicate, right? So there's a mixtape they made, which is 15 minutes long, and the last 10 minutes are like I don't even know how to explain this. Dave, you want to explain what the last 10 minutes are?
There was the show called the Ali G Show, run by Sacha Baron Cohen. He would get into a bunch of characters, and one of his characters, as you guys all know, was Borat. He went to this Arizona Republican Club meeting, like during the Bush era, and he was basically like, "All right." He basically just said a bunch of just dumb shit, like you know how he is, and he was like, "All right, now we're gonna make 10 minutes moment of silence for the Chechnya massacre, which never actually happened." And like he got this entire crowd of like Republicans in Arizona to stand up and make 10 minutes of silence. And like throughout the whole thing, he's like, "Somebody talk, we're gonna start again." And then like at the end, he's like, "All right, we're all done. Oh wait, never mind, 10 more seconds. And like it was just really funny, like the way he did it. So we were like just sitting in the car one day, we were like, "Yo, this is actually hilarious. We might have to put this in the mix." Yeah.
So cool. Right, last question for real. It's a mix of someone else's, maybe you're really into. Bonus if it's someone who's here. Like someone else's mix that you feel like is really awesome.
Yo,
mix of all
anything that
time.
G-Sing makes, bro. Honestly,
Yeah,
yeah.
fucking retweet.
that shit just
G-Sing.
slaps. Like he put out what the Fertile mix, and now that's what's popping like every day. Like that intro and that Damal segment, it's ridiculous. And another all-time favorite, all these NorCal mixes, they're just straight fire every time.
Oh, yeah, man.
I'd agree. I think Aaron, like the quarantine mix that you just put out, that was really good. And I told you that also in
Thank you so
BTF,
much.
but like I think particularly because I remember listening to like your Twin City mixes, like because no, I just thought there was like a lot of obviously hype songs in it, and just like no, it wasn't a mixtape that just like was just a bunch of songs put together. Like I like enjoyed listening.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you actually leaving feedback. Like that's something that people don't do a lot. Like
I don't know why people don't do that. I don't know if that's just like the culture of BTF has maybe shifted since like when I started dancing, but like people used to do that a lot. And
yeah, exactly. And I for
I
me,
learned a
like
lot
when
from
I'm
like
asking
other
for
people's
feedback,
I learned
exactly,
from
yeah.
like getting like watching other people get ripped apart. Like
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, yeah. And yeah, I hope that changes. That's something I hope changes. Like I feel like feedback needs to come back, and I really feel like the OG BTF website needs to like make a little bit of a comeback.
Totally agreed, man.
I don't know. I
Totally
don't know that
agreed.
it will. I feel like I mean, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But at least in the interim, I think it's like really important that like we use a Facebook group because that's what we have right now. It's like when people are spending time on, especially in quarantines, like.
See, the Facebook group
Um,
can be annoying though. Like if someone's like notifications are turned on, like they could be going off. Like I don't want to be
Okay, but like
annoying on the
turn
Facebook.
your turn your notifications off then. I don't know. I mean, the same way you just said, right? That like it's helpful for you to like get feedback. So they left you a comment. Like, I don't know. I feel like we all have to do that, especially those of us who like now kind of know what we're doing. Um, that like if people are posting and getting feedback that they're getting it. Momo, I already like went on about the sorry, I just called you Momo because I'm used to call that from the fucking theory group chat. But
Totally fine.
I already talked about like the OMG one. I feel like a lot of stuff. Actually, I think some of my favorite mixers are the ones that you did with your brother, because like
Yeah,
he's a
together.
phenomenal mixer, but like I just really like the way you guys held your mixes. So any of that stuff that comes together, it's just so different from what everyone else is doing too. And I
Oh,
can hear your
thank you.
guys' like musical background coming through. You know, like you guys definitely look at things in a more technical, creative way.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
man. I really like Momo and your brother, man. Like you guys, like you put out some really good stuff. You guys take like the audio engineering side of things like very seriously, and it shows in your work. I really appreciate that as a listener
Thank
too.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one fun thing is that like I mean we're brothers, so we like will often mix like together, like just sitting in the same room. Like in my brother's like a little bit of a home studio setup, so I think that's just like really cool because it's like the real time bouncing ideas and like critiquing.
Man, I'm so
Yeah,
jealous of that right now. Like having like, that kind of relationship sounds like ridiculous.
yeah, it's really great, especially in quarantine.
Bother Thing, that's what I do. I just send Thing and I just bog the shit out of him until he tells me what's wrong with the mix.
I remember our late night like calls and stuff, man. Like that's how it's done.
Thing and I worked together on a couple segments for DDR this season where like, we like actually worked together. So we were like gonna sit down and look through the mix together, and we'd be like, "All right, cool. I'm gonna call you in 30 minutes." It would be like 7 p.m. Right? We would not get on the
Even
phone
later
until 1 in
sometimes.
the morning. We would not get on
Yeah,
the phone until 1 in the morning, and I had to go to work at 9 in the morning, and we'd be just like, "All right, I guess we start the mix now." Also, they asked for the first cut in like 12 hours, but I guess we're starting the mix now.
it was a
It's
stressful
hard to work
time.
with other mixers. I think it's really hard to work with other mixers if you're not on the same page about like style, and definitely not on the same page about like giving and taking.
Has to be a certain level of
Balancing
just
work.
trust and respect between the two. It's like you know that even if something doesn't sound completely right, but the other person is really feeling it and other people are really feeling it, like give it another chance, you know? Like that's something I've learned. Like not to just trust myself, but to like trust everyone else as well.
It's obviously also like I can speak for myself. Like it's easier to do when like the person you're working with is someone who you like work, you have respect for. Like that was what was so easy for me to work with Big for DDR. Because when Angela was like, "Oh, well, the other mixer we want you to work with is Thig," I was like, "Fucking sign me up!" Like Thig's mixes have been really good,
Yeah,
and
that's
I would love to
mutual,
like
man.
learn. I think it's the other thing. Like you always like are learning. I'm sure like you learn from Amit all the time, and vice versa. Like you're not gonna. Most I feel like fruitful collaborations between mixers are ones where you're not just like sending your mix together to be assembled. You're actually like working on building the set together. So yeah, man, you got like a lot of particularly a lot of the VSB mixes that like you've worked on really well.
I think
Plus
those are the
all the
ones I worked.
mixtapes.
I put the most amount of time into those VSB mixes.
Right.
Avi was here. Avi and Keshav were here earlier, but like the process is very vigorous. Like every last detail, every last thing is like very much taken care of, and it pays off in the end.
Yeah, that's like that extra level of care we're talking about. No, your I was just gonna say that, Quinto. The KPG 2017 mix is one of my actually like all-time favorite mixes. Again, I think it's because of
Yeah,
like
I love that.
having the
See,
performance in my mind. I think also kind of helps, but like that was a
that is the reason why that mix is so good. I go back and listen to that.
it's
I'm like, holy
objectively good
shit,
too.
this is so out of key. This makes like there's so many segments that make no sense in that to me, which like was complete oversight on my part. But like because of the performance, because the performance was what it was, like that mix could have been anything. That mix could have actually been anything. Like that's what's so cool about it, you know?
But I think also like I definitely like see what you're saying, but I think another thing that just like impressed me about the mix was the fact that like you had to fit so many different styles in one mix. And like that's really hard to do. Especially because of the reason we were talking about earlier when like older Punjabi songs follow like particular like formats and stuff like that, and you can't always use the same, and like switching vibes and segments that can be like that cannot like happen super smooth and sound as good. But I think it's like that's a huge thing to be able to pull off. Similarly with the DDR mix, like obviously that's a, I don't mean when I was on team, but I mean before, that's a 2018. Like that's a mix obviously still like
Mhm.
but that was another one where there's like there's a lot of like really cool dynamic stuff happening, and so I definitely like listening to both of those a lot. Anyone, he has no more time on his hands, but if he magically does one day and you want to hire him for a mix, if you want to work with him, also recommend him working.
Right, everyone
right.
say your favorite mix.
At the same time?
All time. No, like one at a time. Same time.
Favorite mix.
I don't think anyone is gonna have the same answer for this, and I'm really curious to see what it is.
This is really hard. Like I don't have an all-time favorite. Like I just go through different moods, and I don't know.
I think I can tell you my favorite right now. Like I've been listening to a lot of like older ones from past seasons recently. FCB at Big Ten. I always like it. I always think I'm gonna get sick of it, and I just always like it. I think it's just one that I just like would love to dance to. Also, that's another part of it. I think when you're a dancer, you're used to like mixing, dancing, knowing how things work together. It also changes how you listen to mixes. But yeah, FCB at Big Ten. Really love that.
Exactly. It's all about creating a feeling, right? It's like your audience and your listeners just have to make them feel a certain sort of way, like listening to it, and everyone feels different ways about different things, and that's the beauty of like this art, you know.
And VSB at BBC. That was that was another G-Sing mix that is just so good. Yeah, I cheated. I gave two, but those are two of my.
I'd say my favorite is NYPD at Bhangra in the Bell. I think it's like 2014.
Yeah, it's 2014.
Yeah,
that DJ Jussie.
DJ Jussie, yeah. I mean, I think like I don't even know if it's on SoundCloud, to be honest. I just watched the YouTube video a bunch, but man, that mix was crazy. And like even stylistically, if you agree or disagree with it, like the song section was insane and it was just so creative. And I think Amit and I probably watched that video like over 1,000 times. That's like the Bhangra video that I grew up on. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Intro, man, where they trapped out with Jatande, like
so sick. Yeah,
that intro was insane.
Yeah, it was like such a cold mix. Yeah.
Those triplet hi-hats, like I will never forget those.
Yeah. See, it's that iconic, and like I don't know, it was just great. The set was great too, so that probably helped. But yeah, it was amazing.
I feel like DJ Jussie like really paved the way for these Toronto DJs nowadays. He was, if correct me if I'm wrong, like people here who've been in the circuit for longer than I have. I feel like DJ Jussie like really like paved the way in terms of bass lines and hi-hats and snares and all that stuff. Like he was one of the first guys to do something like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. We used to bump like, I mean, I've never met him personally, like I don't know, but like when I was in college, like me and like all of my teammates, we always used to bump like the DJ Jussie like remixes of like, I don't know, people like everyone knows Amivik for his like newer stuff, but he had his like he had his first album Jektism, and that had things like
Bullet. Such a good album.
Incredible album.
Yeah,
he had
he remixed multiple of the songs on that. I remember like we used to just bump that on the daily. There was like a year where we just listened to those mixes. Good shit.
Bully's on that album, right? That's a highly underrated song.
There's so much good content on that. So go listen to it if you haven't.
say it's one of the top like Punjabi albums of this past decade for sure.
Yeah.
I think 2014 is something like that is when it came out.
It was right around the time that BK Performance came out, because they were one of the first ones to use the tracks off that album, I think.
Exactly.
Karen, what about you? Favorite mix all time?
Yeah, I would say G Sims Mob Sydney mix. That's like one of my favorite ones of all time. Like it's I would probably like recently I've been listening to it a lot, and I was like a year ago and a couple years ago as well. Like, you know, it still slaps.
It's a fire mix.
Yeah, and then
What
another
about
one
you?
I would say like mixtape wise is the FCB Summer Mixtape Volume 2. That one,
Oh yeah, that's a fucking
that one is a
classic.
classic.
Rom's gonna be so pleased that you said that.
Song selection is crazy on that one. I love that mixtape.
Track list is still floating around somewhere, but
I remember that huge track list, man.
I remember just screenshotting it because I was like, it's gonna get taken down. Like I already know it is.
It got taken down.
I can't find it right now.
I think it's on like Instagram or something.
Not the track list, the mix. I can't find the mix on SoundCloud.
Oh, the mix is back up on SoundCloud. It was down for a while, but I think it's back up. It happened to a bunch of our mixes.
If it is, it's not on the First Class Beats. Someone else has it. Omar said he's looking for it. Put that in there too. That mixtape is also legendary.
Yeah.
By the way, everyone listening, if you have a mix you really like, you should download a hard copy of it. A hard drive and store hard copies of all the mixes you like and all the music you like.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure this mix has
a good idea
download.
to rely on the links living on. Did you go?
Still here.
I'm saying, did you say what your favorite mix was?
I think favorite mixtape is Recession Special by Classics. It was just like he posted that. Someone posted that on their story and like he reposted it, and he was like, back when people had 45 minutes to spare, and I was like, yo, man, like I'll always have 45 minutes to spare for that mixtape.
Yeah.
I only discovered it like in 8th grade, like a couple years after it come out, like and I was like, I would remember just like every single day, like it was when I would be like working out and stuff, just hit the gym, like hit runs, like just listening to this over and over again. It really just like changed my whole perception of like mixing. The flow was just insane. Song selection was on another level, and like I personally don't think it's been replicated in any sort of way since then.
Oh man, if you want to talk about someone who has like their own style, it's Classics. Like within the first 10 seconds that it's a Classics track.
Exactly. Sampling is just on another level, man. And I think favorite team mix is probably NYPD Elite 8, 2012. Herman Thur. That was
That was the Sparta one?
That was Sparta, and the intro, the what's it called, Pink Panther intro. Was it Pink Panther?
Oh, hold on. I think we're talking about two different
James
years.
Bond.
Yeah,
James
that's
Bond.
a different. I think that's a different that I'm thinking.
Yeah, that one was did the Sparta thing
2011.
in the end. Did the Sparta thing in the end.
So the mix that's up on SoundCloud, I think, is a combination of that
also
and
another one that's
Elite.
There's another one that someone, like some random guy posted actually. You just search NYPD Elite 8, it'll come up. Yeah, I got you. This is just like, oh my god, like insane.
So there's a one from Dot and Elite 8 that's like a kind of like a mashup of those two comps. That's the mix that ends in the Sparta thing, but the other Elite 8 one that must.
This one should also end with that. They did the Sparta thing at Elite 8 in the end. And then
I think this is basically half of that other one.
yeah. But they shared a lot of segments between the two, but I think like 2 or 3 segments in the whole mix were different. Yeah, this stuff like that's definitely and that year at Elite 8 was insane as far as mixes go, because there was Classics JJ mix. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
from Virginia. That intro,
that might be my number one actually.
that one was insane, right? Like that mix was crazy as well.
Yeah.
Then even the UNC mix that Kunto and them danced to over there, that was also a really, really good mix, way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It really showed up for that comp, and it is in every which way.
I feel like I would have to probably pick out my favorites going back like in 5-year chunks.
Yeah.
It's really hard to pick out. I think after a
Era by
certain point,
era.
like, yeah, because like styles are so different when you get a certain number of years apart that it really feels like you're comparing apples and oranges.
100%. Yeah, and it's again like it's about how it makes you feel in the moment listening to it.
All right, I think we're gonna sign off. This has been 1, very long, 2, very awesome. I definitely had a lot of fun. Those of you guys who stuck around, kudos to you for writing this thing out.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Hopefully, this was.
Nice to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's also like obviously a great time to like be doing stuff like this where people have time to kill. People are cooped up at home, so hopefully you guys learned some stuff and or found it interesting. Yeah, like Umar is saying, like definitely let us know what you like, what you don't like. We would like to do more of these live things. They're obviously a little different than the recorded ones that we do. But if you have any feedback or suggestions, definitely let us know in the chat. Or if you want to talk to any of the admins directly, feel free to tag us or DM us. And yeah, we'll.
And all the new DJs out there who are listening, like, please, like, do not hesitate to hit up whoever's mixes you're listening to the most. Hit them up. See how they did the things that you like what they did. And
yeah, 100%. Like,
learn a lot.
No one ever gets tired of like hearing, hearing from someone asking for like feedback. I don't think anyone in the community is really like, opposed to it. From my experience it's usually they're just busy or, it's just they're busy if they're not going to help you out. But like, there's so many people who are willing to help you out. So many good resources. All you can do is just hit people up. So that's the biggest thing I would tell people.
None of us like knew how to do this before we started doing it. No one like
I still don't
teaches you how to do bhangra mixing. Like people can teach you. I have like a couple friends that are like actual producers, and they look at what we do and they're just like, I do not understand how you're doing this. So like this is a very different thing. There's no way to do it other than to just try it and get practice. So yeah, I definitely want to echo that. If you if you like need help connecting with mixers or getting resources, free to use like this Discord as a resource. There's a lot of mixers in here, and or a lot of captains who'd be happy to hook you up. Like I said, hit up admin.
There's also a group meet. There's also a group meet run by like some of the DDN mixers. If you guys are interested, you can talk to any one of those DDN mixers, and they'll probably be able to add you. And there are like hundreds of them there.
All right, so we will see you guys at the next live recording. I'm gonna drop out. If anyone would like to, I know you guys have all been muted in this chat. If you would like to discuss, hop over to the general audio chat. We can hang out there for a while if anyone wants to talk and ask questions live and or just catch up. I know a lot of people are just here hanging out still. So this is not the channel to do that in. Hop over to general. And everyone is free to audio chat there. All right, guys, thanks so much. We're wrapped up here.
Bye.
Yes.
Goodbye.